Imagine a world without flowing water, no irrigation for crops, no drinking water for cities, no way to sustain life beyond the nearest river. It's almost impossible to picture, isn't it? Yet for thousands of years, that was the reality for early human societies until they began to master one of nature's most powerful forces. Water is more than just a resource. It's the lifeblood of civilization and the key that unlocked humanity's greatest achievements. From the sun-scorched deserts of Persia to the misty highlands of the Andes, ancient engineers and visionaries designed water systems so advanced, so elegant, that they still leave us in awe today. In this journey, we'll explore 29 breathtaking examples of ancient ingenuity systems that didn't just help people survive, but enabled whole cultures to flourish. These weren't just ditches or wells. They were complex networks of tunnels, aqueducts, stepwells, and reservoirs that transformed barren landscapes into centers of agriculture, trade, and innovation. Think about the qanats of Persia, gently guiding groundwater across deserts using nothing but gravity, or the monumental Roman aqueducts, stretching for miles to bring fresh water into bustling cities. These were the projects that laid the groundwork for the world we live in today, the hidden infrastructure behind empires, philosophies, and daily life. So join us as we dive deep into the secrets of these ancient hydrological wonders. We'll uncover not just how they were built, but why they mattered, how they turned isolated settlements into connected communities, how they supported art, science, and spirituality, and how they shaped the course of human history itself. By the end of this exploration, you won't just see water as something we drink or irrigate with, you'll understand it as a catalyst, a living force that allowed civilization to rise, adapt, and endure against all odds. This is a story of persistence, brilliance, and the timeless human drive to harness the elements, and it all starts here. Picture this: around 10,000 years ago, humanity took one of its most decisive steps, shifting from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled farming. But this agricultural revolution didn't just happen anywhere. It blossomed in the fertile, life-giving basins of great rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia, the Nile in Egypt, the Indus in the Indian subcontinent. These weren't just bodies of water. They were the pulsing hearts of early civilization. Each year, predictable floods would sweep across the valleys, depositing rich, mineral-laden silt that created some of the most productive farmlands on Earth. For the first time, people could rely on a steady food supply, which allowed populations to grow and communities to put down permanent roots. Yet this blessing came with a significant challenge. The river's bounty was seasonal and often unpredictable. A flood might be too weak one year, leading to drought and famine, or too powerful the next, washing away entire settlements. To truly thrive, these early societies had to move from simply reacting to nature's whims to actively managing this vital resource. This necessity sparked the very first experiments in hydraulic engineering. Farmers began digging simple canals to divert floodwaters to their fields, creating the earliest forms of irrigation. They constructed basic dams and reservoirs to capture and store water for the dry seasons. These were humble beginnings, but they represented a profound shift in the human relationship with the natural world, a shift from dependence to control. This mastery of water didn't just mean more reliable harvests. It fundamentally reshaped society itself. With a surplus of food, not everyone needed to farm. This surplus allowed for the emergence of new specializations: artisans, traders, priests, and administrators. It enabled the growth of towns and eventually the world's first great cities, like on the Euphrates or Mohenjo-Daro on the Indus. Managing these increasingly complex water systems required cooperation, planning, and governance, laying the groundwork for codified laws and centralized authority. The ability to control water became synonymous with power and prosperity, turning these river valleys into what historians now call the cradle of hydraulic civilization, the very foundation upon which all subsequent human progress was built. Now let's journey to the heart of the ancient Persian Empire, where one of history's most elegant and enduring solutions to water scarcity was born. In the vast, arid landscapes where surface water was a fleeting mirage, Persian engineers looked beneath the earth, mastering a technology so effective it would quench the thirst of empires for millennia, the Kanat. This was not a structure of imposing stone or roaring currents, but a hidden, silent network, a gentle, gravity-fed miracle that turned some of the world's most unforgiving deserts into habitable, even prosperous, oases of human civilization. The principle behind a Kanat is brilliantly simple, yet its execution required breathtaking precision. It all began high in the mountain foothills, where workers would first locate an aquifer, a saturated layer of gravel and sand holding precious groundwater. From this mother well, they would then chart a course straight down to the plains below, where their village or city awaited. But instead of digging a simple well, they engineered a gently sloping underground tunnel, often miles long, that would allow water to seep in from the aquifer and then flow steadily downhill, entirely powered by gravity. The slope was everything too steep, and the water would rush through, eroding the tunnel walls, too shallow, and the flow would stagnate. This gradient, often a drop of just 1 meter for every 1,000 meters of length, is a testament to their advanced understanding of hydrology and geometry. Of course, building this subterranean river was a monumental task. The most visible signs of a Kanat on the surface are the series of vertical access shafts, resembling a line of craters marching across the desert. These weren't just for initial digging, they were vital for the system's long-term survival. Workers would descend these shafts to clear out silt and debris, ensuring the tunnel never clogged. They also provided crucial ventilation for the laborers deep below and served as precise markers to guide the tunnel's direction. The entire project was a communal effort, often funded by wealthy patrons, and the knowledge of Kanat construction became a highly specialized, revered craft passed down through generations of skilled workers known as mukanis. The benefits of this system were profound. Because the water traveled underground, it was protected from the scorching sun, drastically reducing evaporation, a critical advantage in desert climates. The earth itself acted as a natural filter, keeping the water cool and free of the contaminants that often plagued open canals. This reliable, clean supply didn't just allow for survival, it enabled the flourishing of magnificent cities like Persepolis. It supported agriculture, creating lush gardens and orchards in the dust, and it provided water for drinking, cooking, and industry. The Kanat was so central to Persian life that it became deeply woven into the culture's social and legal fabric, with complex water-sharing laws developed to manage this most precious resource fairly among the community. The genius of the Kanat couldn't be contained. This Persian technology became one of antiquity's most successful exports, spreading along trade routes and through conquest. The Achaemenid Empire carried it westward, and it was adopted across the Middle East, known as Karez in Central Asia and Fagara in North Africa. The Romans encountered them and were impressed. The technology even traveled along the Silk Road all the way to Western China. In Spain, under Moorish rule, qanats called viajes de agua became the lifeline for cities and helped transform Andalusia into an agricultural powerhouse. This widespread adoption stands as a powerful testament to its effectiveness, a silent, underground web of ingenuity that connected diverse civilizations through a shared solution to a universal human challenge. While the Persians mastered the hidden, subterranean flow of water, the Romans took a dramatically different approach. They brought water into the open air and turned its journey into a monumental, awe-inspiring spectacle. Their aqueducts were not mere utilities. They were bold declarations of human ambition, stretching across the landscape like stone arteries, pumping the very lifeblood of an empire into the heart of its greatest cities. Imagine standing in the bustling forum of ancient Rome, surrounded by the sounds of commerce and conversation, and looking up to see a towering arcade of arches, each one supporting a channel of fresh, clean water that began its journey in distant, pristine mountain springs dozens of miles away. This was the daily reality for a Roman citizen, a constant, visible reminder of the engineering genius and organizational power that defined their world. The scale of these projects is almost incomprehensible even by modern standards. The Aqua Appia, Rome's first aqueduct commissioned by Appius Claudius Caecus in 312 BCE, was a relatively modest 16 kilometers long, mostly running underground. But this was just the beginning. As the city's thirst grew, so did the ambition of its engineers. The Aqua Marcia, built over a century later, stretched a staggering 91 kilometers, and much of it was carried on those iconic, soaring arches to maintain the crucial, gentle downward slope. The gradient, that was the secret to the entire system. This gradient, often a drop of only a few centimeters every 100 meters, was calculated with astonishing precision. Using simple tools like the chorobates, a precise leveling instrument, Roman surveyors would map the course for years before a single stone was laid, ensuring the water would flow smoothly and continuously from source to city, powered by nothing but gravity. This relentless, predictable flow of water didn't just quench thirst, it fundamentally transformed Roman society and set a new standard for public health and urban living. The aqueducts fed vast nympheums or public fountains, ensuring that no citizen, rich or poor, was ever far from fresh water. They supplied the famous public baths, the thermae, which were far more than just places to get clean. These were sprawling social complexes, centers of business, conversation, and leisure, where thousands could gather daily. This culture of bathing and the abundant water supply helped promote hygiene on a scale unseen before in the ancient world, likely reducing the spread of disease and contributing to the population's overall well-being. The water also flushed the city's sophisticated sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima, carrying waste away to the Tiber River and keeping the streets cleaner and healthier. Yet to see the aqueducts as merely practical is to miss half their story. They were also potent symbols of imperial power and Roman identity. When an aqueduct entered a city, it often culminated in a magnificent fountain or a decorated distribution tank called a castellum aquae, a celebration of the water's arrival. Emperors used the construction of new aqueducts as a form of propaganda, a tangible demonstration of their beneficence and their ability to tame nature for the good of the people. The Aqua Claudia, begun by the Emperor Caligula and completed by Claudius in the 1st century CE, is a perfect example of this monumental pride. Its massive, rugged stone arches, some still standing today near the Roman countryside, communicate raw strength and permanence. They were built to last, and indeed, many aqueducts continued to function for centuries after the fall of Rome itself. The legacy of Roman hydraulic engineering echoes far beyond the ruins of antiquity. The principles they perfected: the precise gradient, the use of arches to span valleys, the integrated system of distribution became the foundational textbook for water engineers for the next 2 millennia. During the Renaissance, a renewed interest in Roman texts inspired a revival of aqueduct construction across Europe. Even today, the modern systems that deliver water to our own cities operate on the same basic principle of gravity-fed transport that the Romans mastered. Their aqueducts stand as a timeless lesson that infrastructure, at its very best, is more than just functional. It can be a thing of profound beauty, a symbol of civic pride, and a lasting testament to a civilization's greatest aspirations. Now, let's travel from the monumental grandeur of Roman aqueducts to the sun-baked plains of India, where an entirely different but equally ingenious solution to water scarcity emerged, one that reached not for the skies, but deep into the earth itself. In the arid landscapes of Western India, particularly in states like Rajasthan and Gujarat, the brutal cycle of monsoon rains followed by long, parching droughts presented a constant challenge. The answer wasn't to bring water from afar, but to access it where it naturally gathered underground, and to do so in a way that transformed a simple necessity into a profound social and architectural experience. This is the story of the stepwell, known locally as a baoli or vav, a structure that is so much more than a well. It is a breathtaking inversion of architecture, a place where you don't climb up to reach a summit, but descend down into the earth to discover a community's heart. Unlike a simple well with a rope and bucket, a stepwell is a complex subterranean structure, essentially an inverted pyramid carved into the ground. Its defining feature is a long, symmetrical staircase consisting of dozens, sometimes hundreds, of steps that lead down to the water table. During the peak of the dry season, the water level might be many flights down, but as the monsoon rains replenish the aquifer, the water slowly rises, shortening the journey. This design was brilliantly pragmatic. It provided reliable access to water year-round, even as the level fluctuated dramatically. But the genius of the stepwell lies in how it turned this purely functional descent into something magnificent. The walls lining this grand staircase are not bare earth. They are meticulously crafted facades, lined with colonnades of pillars, intricate carvings, and shaded pavilions that offer refuge from the blistering sun at every level. The architectural ambition of these structures is simply staggering. Take Chand Bayori in the village of Abhanari, Rajasthan, for instance. Built in the 9th century, it is one of the largest and most visually arresting stepwells in the world. Its geometric precision is hypnotic. On one side, a dizzying cascade of 3,500 narrow steps descend 13 stories down, arranged in a perfect, mesmerizing symmetry that creates a breathtaking play of light and shadow as the sun moves across the sky. It feels less like a water source and more like a monumental temple to water itself, and in many ways it was. Stepwells were often commissioned by royal patrons or wealthy merchants as acts of piety and public charity. They were frequently adorned with small temples, shrines, and devotional niches carved with images of Hindu gods and goddesses, particularly those associated with water like Varuna or fertility goddesses. This fusion of the sacred and the utilitarian meant that a trip to collect water was also an opportunity for prayer and spiritual reflection. This integration into daily life is what truly set the stepwell apart from other ancient water systems. It became a vital social nexus, especially for women, who are traditionally responsible for water collection. The long, cool, shaded corridors provided a rare, sheltered public space where they could gather, talk, and share news away from the heat of the day. It was a place for community meetings, for merchants to rest, and for travelers to find respite on long journeys. During the intense heat of summer, the temperature at the bottom of a stepwell could be significantly cooler than the surface air, making it a natural refuge for entire communities. They became stages for everyday life, places where festivals were celebrated, where rituals were performed and where the social fabric of a town was continually woven together. The decline of these incredible structures began with the British colonial era. The new administrators, with their focus on piped water and sanitation, viewed these open wells as unhygienic and primitive, failing to grasp their deep cultural and social significance. Many were abandoned, neglected, and slowly filled with silt and debris, fading from public memory. But in recent decades, there has been a powerful resurgence of interest. Historians, architects, and conservationists are now working to restore and preserve these magnificent monuments, recognizing them as unique treasures of India's heritage. They stand as a powerful testament to a holistic philosophy of design, where infrastructure is not merely functional but is also beautiful, spiritual, and social, a place that nourishes the body, the soul, and the community all at once. While the Romans built arches that defied the sky and Indian architects carved steps deep into the earth, the ancient Egyptians perfected a water management system that worked in perfect harmony with the rhythms of nature itself. Their entire civilization was a gift of the Nile, but it was a gift that required immense wisdom and careful coordination to unwrap. Each year, with a predictability that felt almost divine, the great river would swell from summer rains far to the south in the Ethiopian highlands. By late August, a surge of silt-rich, chocolate-brown water would flood the narrow valley, promising life but also posing a threat of chaotic destruction. The Egyptian genius lay not in constructing monumental countermeasures against this force, but in gently guiding it, creating a system of basin irrigation that turned the annual inundation into a precise, life-giving engine for the most stable agricultural society the ancient world had ever known. The system was elegantly simple in concept, yet its execution demanded a sophisticated understanding of the land and impeccable timing. Farmers, organized under the oversight of local officials and scribes, would construct a network of large, trapezoidal earthen banks that divided the floodplain into a series of managed cells or basins. These banks, reinforced with Nile mud and reeds, were not designed to hold back the flood permanently, but to temporarily capture it. As the river rose, canals would guide the turbid water into these prepared basins, where it would be held for several weeks, sometimes up to a month and a half. This was the most crucial phase. During this quiet period of immersion, two miraculous processes unfolded. First, the suspended silt, incredibly rich in nutrients and minerals from the volcanic highlands of Ethiopia, would gently settle onto the fields, depositing a fresh layer of fertile topsoil that eliminated any need for artificial fertilizer. Second, the water itself would slowly percolate deep into the porous earth, creating a vast subsurface reservoir of moisture that would nourish the crops long after the floodwaters had receded. Once the river level dropped again, a carefully managed drainage process began. The farmers would breach the earthen banks at strategic points or use simple sluices to allow the remaining water to drain back into the Nile, leaving behind a field of perfectly saturated, nutrient-rich mud primed for planting. This was the moment for sowing. With the soil still soft and moist, farmers would scatter seeds of emmer wheat, barley, flax, and other staples, and then simply drive their herds of sheep or goats across the fields to tread the seeds into the fertile ground. The stored moisture in the soil was usually sufficient to bring the crops to harvest without the need for any further irrigation, a testament to the system's beautiful efficiency. This entire cycle, from the arrival of the flood to the draining of the basins, was a community-wide effort that required absolute synchronization. It was a dance with the river, and everyone had to know their steps. This profound reliance on the Nile's natural cycle deeply permeated Egyptian culture, religion, and governance. The annual inundation was so central to their existence that it defined their entire calendar, which was divided into 3 seasons: Akit inundation, Peret growing, and Shemu harvest. The success of the flood was a matter of state security, and the pharaoh himself was seen as the ultimate guarantor of this divine bounty. A perfect flood, one that was neither too low, risking famine, nor too high, risking destructive flooding, was interpreted as a sign of the god's favor and the pharaoh's effective intermediation. In fact, nilometers, stepped structures used to measure the river's height, were strategically placed along the river and monitored by priests and officials. The readings they took were not just practical data. They were used to predict the harvest yield and set that year's tax rates, directly linking the river's behavior to the economy of the state. The success of this system is written in the unparalleled longevity and stability of ancient Egypt. By working with the river's natural rhythm rather than against it, they achieved a remarkably sustainable form of agriculture that required no complex machinery and replenished the soil's fertility year after year, millennium after millennium. This agricultural surplus was the fundamental bedrock upon which everything else was built. It freed a large portion of the population from farming, allowing them to become the artisans, soldiers, scribes, and laborers who built the pyramids, erected the great temples of Karnak and Luxor, and supported a complex hierarchical society. The Basin irrigation system created a resilience that allowed Egyptian culture to flourish for over 3,000 years with a continuity rarely seen in history. It stands as a timeless lesson in the power of observation, adaptation, and the profound abundance that can be found not by conquering nature, but by learning to partner with its deepest rhythms. From the predictable, rhythmic floods of the Nile, we now journey to a landscape of breathtaking verticality, the jagged peaks and plunging valleys of the Andes Mountains. Here, the challenge wasn't harnessing a predictable river, but conquering gravity itself on slopes so steep that conventional farming seemed impossible. The Inca Empire, which rose to power in the 15th century, faced an agricultural dilemma: a rapidly growing population and a territory dominated by unforgiving mountains. Their solution was nothing short of revolutionary, a transformation of the very mountains into a cascading tapestry of fertile gardens. They didn't just farm the land, they sculpted it, creating vast, stair-like terraces known as Andenes, supported by a masterful network of irrigation channels that turned barren inclines into some of the most productive and resilient farmlands of the ancient world. The construction of these terraces was a monumental feat of engineering and communal labor. Each terrace began with the careful placement of large stone retaining walls, expertly fitted together without mortar in the classic Inca style that has withstood centuries of earthquakes. Behind these walls, workers would layer gravel and stone for drainage, followed by richer topsoil and sand, and finally a layer of fertile earth, effectively creating deep, well-drained planting beds that clung to the mountainside. This design was brilliant for multiple reasons. Primarily, it created flat, stable land for crops on otherwise unusable slopes, dramatically expanding the empire's arable territory. But just as importantly, these stone walls prevented the catastrophic soil erosion that would naturally occur from heavy rains on such steep grades. The terraces acted like a giant staircase, slowing the flow of water down the mountain and allowing it to soak into the soil rather than washing the precious earth away. Yet a terrace without water is just a dry, elevated planter box. The true genius of the Inca system lay in the sophisticated hydraulic network that brought life-giving water to each and every level. Engineers designed canals and aqueducts to capture water from high-altitude streams, glaciers, and natural springs, often miles away from the terraces themselves. The precision of these channels is astounding. They were carefully lined with stone and laid at a consistent, gentle gradient to maintain a steady, manageable flow, using nothing more than simple leveling tools and an intimate knowledge of the land. This water was then artfully distributed through a series of smaller canals and gates, directing the flow from the highest terraces down to the lowest in a controlled, cascading system. At world-renowned sites like Machu Picchu, this network is still visible today, a labyrinth of stone channels that fed water through the entire citadel, supplying the terraces, ceremonial fountains, and residences, demonstrating a holistic integration of water management into every aspect of urban planning. This mastery of hydrology and agriculture allowed the Incas to cultivate an incredible diversity of crops at various altitudes, a practice known as vertical archipelagos. On warmer, lower elevation terraces, they grew maize and fruits. At higher, cooler levels, they cultivated thousands of varieties of potatoes, quinoa, and other tubers perfectly suited to the climate. This not only provided a balanced and nutritious diet, but also acted as a natural insurance policy against crop failure. A frost might wipe out the potatoes on one level, but the maize lower down would remain unharmed. The surplus generated by these highly productive terraces was stored in massive stone warehouses called qulqas, which dotted the mountainsides. This stored food could be redistributed by the state during famines or used to support the massive labor force, the army, and the extensive road system that bound the empire together. The legacy of the Inca terraces extends far beyond their historical achievements. They offer powerful lessons in sustainability for our modern world. Unlike some agricultural systems that deplete the soil, the Inca methods were inherently regenerative. The stone walls absorbed heat during the day and released it at night, protecting crops from frost and creating unique microclimates. The careful drainage prevented waterlogging and salinization, preserving the soil's health for generations. Today, many of these ancient terraces are still in use by local Peruvian communities, a testament to their enduring functionality. In a time when we grapple with soil degradation and sustainable food production, the Incas stand as a profound example of how to work in harmony with a challenging environment, not against it. They didn't see a mountain as an obstacle, but as an opportunity, a blank canvas upon which they painted a masterpiece of ecological engineering that fed an empire and continues to inspire awe centuries later. Now, let's shift our focus from these grand, community-wide projects to a tool that put the power of irrigation directly into the hands of the individual farmer. While empires were building monumental aqueducts and terraces, the everyday agriculturalist faced a much more immediate and personal challenge: how to lift water from the river or canal right in front of them up to their fields on the higher bank. The solution they developed was a masterpiece of elegant simplicity, a device so effective and intuitive that it would remain in use for thousands of years. This is the story of the shaduf, a humble lever that helped lift civilization itself to new heights. The design of the shaduf is a perfect application of basic physics. Imagine a long, horizontal pole like a seesaw balanced on an upright frame. On one end of this pole, you hang a bucket made of animal skin or woven reeds. On the other end, you fasten a heavy counterweight, typically a lump of dried clay or a heavy stone. The operation was beautifully straightforward. A farmer would pull down on the bucket end, dipping it into the water source. Once filled, the counterweight on the opposite end would naturally do its job, making it remarkably easy to swing the heavy bucket up and over to the waiting irrigation channel or field. With a simple tilt, the water would be poured out and the process would begin again. This rhythmic, almost meditative motion, pull, lift, pour, could be repeated for hours, moving significant volumes of water with a fraction of the effort required by hauling it up by hand in a single bucket. Its origins point to the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia around 3000 BCE, a time when the first great cities were emerging and the demand for food was soaring. While the large state-managed canal networks brought water to the general region, the Shaduf solved that last critical yard problem, enabling farmers to precisely direct water to their specific plots of land, even those on slightly elevated ground that the canals couldn't reach. This was a transformative leap in agricultural efficiency. A single farmer could now irrigate a much larger area than was previously possible, leading to greater crop yields and a more reliable food supply for their family and community. From its Mesopotamian birthplace, the technology spread rapidly along trade routes. It was adopted with great success in ancient Egypt, where tomb paintings from the New Kingdom vividly depict farmers operating shadufs along the banks of the Nile, and it eventually found its way across the Mediterranean and into parts of Asia. The true revolution of the shaduf was not just technological but social. It was an affordable, accessible technology that did not require a massive state apparatus or a team of engineers to build or operate. A single family could construct one from locally available materials: wood, stone, and rope. This democratization of water access empowered the smallholder farmer, reducing their total dependence on the timing of natural floods or the dictates of a central authority managing large-scale irrigation projects. It gave them a measure of control over their own destiny and productivity. This boost in individual capability, multiplied across thousands of farmers, contributed enormously to the overall food security and economic stability of early civilizations, proving that a society's strength is often built on the cumulative impact of countless small, simple innovations. Leaving behind the soaring Andes, we now venture into the heart of Central Asia, to the vast and unforgiving expanse of the Taklamakan Desert. This sea of shifting sand dunes, one of the most arid places on Earth, seems an unlikely stage for human achievement. Yet, here along the ancient Silk Road, a network of oasis towns not only survived but thrived, becoming legendary hubs of culture and commerce. Their secret lay hidden beneath the blistering sands, a labyrinth of underground waterways known as the Karez, a hydrological masterpiece of cooperation that turned barren ground into islands of life. The principle of the Karez will feel familiar, a brilliant echo of the Persian Kanat, and its arrival in China's Xinjiang region around 2,000 years ago is a story of technological diffusion along the very trade routes it would later sustain. The system begins where water naturally gathers, at the base of towering mountain ranges like the Tian Shan and the Kunlun. Winter snows and occasional rains high in these mountains would percolate deep into the ground, forming vast subterranean reservoirs within the loose gravel and sand of alluvial fans that spilled out onto the desert's edge. The genius of the Karez builders was in knowing how to tap this hidden bounty. They would first dig a mother well straight down until they struck this precious groundwater table. Then, working with an almost supernatural sense of slope and direction, teams of workers would begin digging a gently sloping underground tunnel, often many miles long, that would start at the mother well and snake its way across the desert towards the intended oasis. The construction was a feat of immense difficulty and precision. A series of vertical shafts spaced about every 30 to 50 meters were dug along the entire length of the tunnel's route. These shafts served multiple critical purposes. They provided ventilation for the workers toiling deep underground. They were the means for removing the excavated earth, and most importantly, they acted as surveying points. Builders would use simple but effective tools like plumb bobs and lanterns to ensure the tunnel maintained its crucial, minuscule gradient from the mother well to the outlet. This gentle slope, often a drop of just 1 meter per kilometer, was the system's silent engine, allowing gravity to do all the work, pulling the water effortlessly through the dark tunnel without any need for pumps. The water that finally emerged at the oasis outlet was cool, clean, and protected from the devastating evaporation that would have instantly claimed any exposed canal in the desert sun. But the true wonder of the Karez is not found in its engineering alone, but in the social structure that grew around it. Maintaining this fragile, hidden network was not a task for a lone individual. It was a sacred responsibility shared by the entire community. The knowledge of how to locate the water, dig the tunnels, and most critically, how to maintain them was passed down through generations of specialized craftsmen. These maintenance rituals were a constant necessity, as silt and sand would slowly accumulate in the tunnels, threatening to choke the flow. Communities developed intricate and deeply ingrained sets of rules for water allocation. The flow from the Karez was often divided by time, with each family or plot of land receiving the right to use the water for a specific period, measured by carefully monitored water clocks or the shadow of a sundial. This ensured a fair and equitable distribution of this most precious resource, preventing conflicts and fostering a powerful sense of communal interdependence. The survival of the entire oasis, its fields of wheat and melons, its groves of date palms, and its very population depended on this unwavering cooperation. The impact of the Karez on world history is profound. These systems were the beating heart of the Silk Road. Great oasis cities like Turpan, situated in a deep depression below sea level and surrounded by the desert, owed their very existence to the Karez. The reliable water supply allowed them to produce surplus food, which could then be offered to the endless caravans of camels and merchants trudging across the brutal Taklamakan. These oases became more than just pit stops. They were bustling centers where goods, ideas, religions, and technologies were exchanged between East and West. The Karez didn't just water crops, it facilitated the cross-pollination of human civilization itself, enabling the flow of everything from Buddhism and paper-making to spices and silks. It stands as a timeless testament to a simple, powerful truth. In the face of the most extreme environments, our greatest tool for survival has never been just technology, but our ability to work together, to share fairly, and to build systems that sustain not just individuals, but entire communities for generations. From the cooperative Karez networks of the Silk Road, we now turn to a civilization that mastered the art of water capture in one of the most spectacular settings imaginable. Carved into the vibrant red sandstone cliffs of southern Jordan, the city of Petra stands as a monument to human ingenuity in the face of absolute aridity. The Nabateans, a nomadic Arab people who settled here over 2,000 years ago, faced a paradox. They had chosen to build their capital in a deep, mountainous desert ravine, a location easily defensible and strategically perfect for controlling trade routes, but one that received barely enough rainfall to sustain life. Their solution was not to import water from great distances, but to become absolute masters of the little water that nature provided, developing a water management system of such sophistication that it turned this barren canyon into a lush, thriving metropolis known as the Rose-Red City. The Nabatean strategy was one of total water capture and absolute conservation. Unlike the Romans who transported water overland or the Persians who tapped groundwater, the Nabateans became brilliant rain farmers. Their desert home experienced infrequent but often torrential downpours, flash floods that could rage through the narrow canyons with devastating force. Instead of seeing these floods as a threat, they recognized them as their primary water source. They engineered the entire landscape around Petra to capture, channel, and store every possible drop of this sporadic bounty. A network of meticulously planned dams was their first line of defense and capture. They constructed massive diversion dams at the mouths of side canyons, designed to steer the violent floodwaters away from the city center and into a main channel. Smaller check dams and terrace walls across slopes slowed the water's flow, allowing it to percolate into the soil and recharge the aquifers rather than simply washing away. But the true marvel lies in how they moved and stored this precious resource. The Nabateans carved and constructed an extensive system of aqueducts and channels throughout the city. Some were open conduits cut directly into the cliff faces, while others were sophisticated terracotta pipelines sealed with waterproof cement that snaked along the rock walls. These channels were engineered with precise gradients to maintain a steady flow, guiding water from the collection points to where it was needed most. This water was then fed into a vast array of underground cisterns, hidden from the sun and potential enemies. The Nabateans were master rock-cut architects, and they hollowed out enormous reservoirs within the solid sandstone, some capable of holding thousands of gallons. Over 200 of these cisterns have been discovered, ensuring that even during extended droughts, the city had a reliable reserve. This water wasn't just for survival, it was a tool of grandeur. It fed ornate public fountains, lush royal gardens, and even sophisticated swimming pools, creating an oasis of luxury and comfort that must have seemed miraculous to travelers arriving from the harsh desert. This hydrological mastery was the very engine of Petra's wealth and power. Situated at the crossroads of major incense trade routes linking Arabia, the Mediterranean, and the East, Petra was a mandatory stop for caravan travelers and their camels, all of whom required enormous quantities of water. The Nabateans didn't just have water, they had a surplus. This allowed them to provide hospitality to these wealthy trade caravans, offering secure lodging, fresh supplies, and most importantly, abundant water for a price. Water management was directly tied to economics and politics. The control and distribution of water solidified the power of the Nabatean king and elite, demonstrating their divine favor and organizational prowess to their citizens and to visitors. The ability to create such abundance in the desert was their greatest display of strength and sophistication, making Petra not just a stop on a trade route, but a destination of power and wonder. The legacy of Petra's water systems is a powerful lesson in sustainability and adaptation for our modern world. In an era of increasing water scarcity, the Nabatean philosophy of maximizing every single drop is more relevant than ever. They did not attempt to conquer their environment with overwhelming force, but instead learned to listen to it and adapt their technology to its rhythms. They understood their local climate intimately and designed a system that worked in harmony with it, capturing water at its source and protecting it jealously from loss through evaporation or runoff. Their success proves that human settlement is possible in even the most challenging environments, but only if we prioritize intelligent design, conservation, and a deep respect for the natural cycles that govern water's availability. The silent, rock-cut channels of Petra remind us that the most advanced solution is not always the most massive, but often the most clever and the most mindful. While the Nabateans were sculpting their desert capital and the Incas were terracing their mountains, another civilization, over 4,000 years ago, was achieving something perhaps even more revolutionary in a completely different part of the world. In the fertile plains of the Indus River Valley in what is now Pakistan, the people of Mohenjo-Daro were building a city so meticulously planned, so obsessed with order and cleanliness that it would not be rivaled for millennia. At the very heart of this urban masterpiece stood a structure that perfectly encapsulates their unique genius, the Great Bath. This is not a grand aqueduct or a sprawling irrigation network, but something far more intimate and telling, a large, watertight public pool that reveals a society where water was central not just to survival, but to ritual, community, and a surprisingly modern concept of urban living. The Great Bath itself is a marvel of prehistoric engineering that immediately commands respect. Imagine a rectangular tank, roughly 12 meters long, 7 meters wide, and 2.5 meters deep, sunken into the ground and accessed by a graceful staircase at either end. But its true sophistication is in the details invisible to the eye. The entire structure was built with extraordinary precision using finely baked bricks, and then made completely watertight with a layer of bitumen, a natural tar, applied between the bricks and as a coating on the floor and walls. This careful waterproofing ensured that not a single precious drop would seep out into the sandy soil. The bath was surrounded by a colonnade and rooms that scholars believe were used for changing or perhaps for religious preparations, suggesting that accessing the water was a formal, ceremonial process. An adjacent well would have supplied fresh water, and a large corbelled drain in one corner allowed for efficient emptying and cleaning, indicating a clear understanding of hygiene and maintenance. This was not a haphazard pond. It was a carefully designed and maintained public facility, built to last and built to impress. The purpose of the Great Bath has been the subject of fascination and debate for decades. The most widely accepted theory is that it served a primary ritual or religious function. In many ancient cultures, water is a powerful symbol of purification, renewal, and spiritual transition. It is easy to envision priests or community members performing ceremonial ablutions here, perhaps before important religious events or as part of rites of passage. The very design of the structure, sunken and secluded within a complex of other large buildings thought to be administrative or religious, lends weight to this idea. It feels like a sacred space set apart from the hustle and bustle of daily life. However, to label it solely as a temple pool might be an oversimplification. It could have also functioned as a social venue, a place for the community's elite to gather, or even as a practical way to find relief from the intense Indus Valley heat. Its true genius lies in this very ambiguity. It likely served multiple overlapping purposes, blending the practical, the social, and the spiritual in a way that reflects a deeply integrated society. Yet the story of water in Mohenjo-Daro extends far beyond this one magnificent structure. What makes the Indus Valley civilization truly extraordinary is how this emphasis on water management was woven into the very fabric of the entire city, creating a level of urban sanitation that would not become standard in Europe for another 4,000 years. The city was a grid of wide, straight streets, and running beneath them was a sophisticated, city-wide drainage system that is nothing short of astounding. Almost every single house, from the largest to the most modest, contained its own bathing area with a finely bricked floor that sloped towards a drain. These domestic drains then connected to larger, covered channels that ran along the main streets, all designed with careful gradients to carry wastewater out of the city. These were not open sewers. They were carefully constructed tunnels of brick with inspection traps and manholes for regular cleaning and maintenance. This concern for water extended to its supply as well. The city was dotted with hundreds of wells, constructed with the same precise brickwork, ensuring that clean drinking water was readily available to neighborhoods throughout Mohenjo-Daro. This holistic system, from the grand, ceremonial Great Bath down to the humble, functional well in a neighborhood courtyard, paints a picture of a society that placed an immense priority on public health, cleanliness, and civic order. It suggests a highly organized, likely centralized authority capable of planning and enforcing such uniform standards across a vast urban population. The people of Mohenjo-Daro understood that managing water wasn't just about bringing it in. It was also about managing what happened to it afterwards, a concept of stunningly advanced environmental and urban planning. The legacy of Mohenjo-Daro and its Great Bath is profound, yet it remains shrouded in mystery. We cannot read their script, so we do not know what gods they worshipped in that space or the exact words of the rituals performed there. But we don't need a deciphered language to understand their values. The archaeological evidence speaks volumes. They left behind a powerful testament to the idea that civilization is not measured solely by monumental palaces or treasures of gold, but by the quality of life afforded to its citizens. Their investment in sanitation, in public works, and in a shared civic infrastructure reveals a society that valued collective well-being. The Great Bath stands as a silent, powerful symbol of this ethos, a place where water was not merely a resource for crops, but the very medium for spiritual purity, social cohesion, and a remarkably modern vision of a clean, healthy, and well-ordered urban life. But to truly grasp the scale of Ankor's ambition, we must look to its most breathtaking creations, the vast, geometrically perfect reservoirs known as barrays. The West Barre is the most staggering example, an artificial body of water so immense it defies belief. Stretching 8 kilometers long and 2.3 kilometers wide, this colossal reservoir covers an area of over 18 square kilometers. To put that in perspective, it is larger than the entire island of Manhattan. Its construction in the 11th century was an act of sheer topographical domination. Using only human labor, elephants, and simple tools, Khmer engineers built massive earthen dikes, some over 30 meters wide and several stories tall, to contain a volume of water that could support the metropolis for months. The barre was not just a passive storage tank, it was the heart of a pressurized system. Water released from its controlled outlets would surge into the main canals with enough force to reach the farthest corners of the network, a testament to their profound understanding of hydraulics and gravity-fed flow. These reservoirs were also deeply symbolic, representing the Hindu ocean of milk, a cosmological symbol of creation and divine power. They were earthly mirrors of celestial order, reflecting the king's role as the intermediary between the gods and his people, harnessing the elemental force of water to sustain his divine mandate. This unparalleled control over water was the absolute bedrock of the Khmer Empire's power and cultural explosion. The ability to produce 3 or even 4 rice harvests per year, instead of relying on a single monsoon-dependent crop, created an agricultural surplus of almost unimaginable proportions. This surplus did more than just prevent famine. It funded an empire. It liberated a massive segment of the population from subsistence farming, allowing them to become the artisans, soldiers, priests, and laborers who built the iconic stone temples that define Angkor today. The very stones of Angkor Wat and the Bayon were carried and carved by a population fed by this engineered landscape. The water network itself facilitated the transport of these massive sandstone blocks from distant quarries, floating them on canals directly to the construction sites. The system also supported a complex, stratified society with a large standing army that could project power across Southeast Asia, and an elaborate priesthood that maintained the spiritual rituals believed to ensure the kingdom's continued prosperity. Every aspect of Khmer grandeur, its military might, its architectural splendor, its religious profundity was quite literally watered by the canals and barrays. However, the very system that enabled Angkor's zenith may have also contributed to its eventual decline. Recent archaeological research using advanced LiDAR technology has revealed a sprawling, low-density metropolis that pushed its environment to the absolute limit. The constant need to expand the water network to feed a growing population led to massive deforestation, which in turn increased soil erosion and siltation in the canals and barrays. This silting would have reduced the system's capacity and efficiency, making it increasingly vulnerable to catastrophic failures. Furthermore, the reliance on such a complex, interconnected system made Ankor susceptible to climate shifts. Evidence suggests that the empire's final centuries were marked by periods of intense drought, followed by exceptionally severe monsoons, precisely the kind of volatility that a system designed for predictable seasonal patterns would struggle to handle. A prolonged drought would have emptied the reservoirs, while a particularly violent monsoon could have overwhelmed the intricate network of canals and dikes, causing devastating floods that washed away the very infrastructure of civilization. The story of Ankor, therefore, is a powerful and poignant lesson in both the immense promise and the potential peril of large-scale environmental engineering, a reminder that even the greatest human achievements must ultimately bow to the forces of nature. While the vast barrens of Ankor harnessed the power of stored rainwater, another civilization was perfecting a way to capture the relentless energy of flowing rivers themselves. Imagine a massive wooden wheel creaking and turning with the steady, powerful current of a river. Attached to its rim are a series of clay pots dipping into the water below, filling up, and then being carried to the very top of the wheel's rotation, where they gracefully tip their contents into a waiting aqueduct that carries the water to fields high above the riverbank. This is the Noria, a breathtakingly simple yet profoundly effective machine that turned the untamed energy of a river into a lifeline for agriculture, representing one of history's most elegant marriages of natural power and human innovation. Originating in the Middle East, most likely in the region stretching from modern-day Syria to Iran around the time of the Roman Empire, the Noria addressed a fundamental problem that had limited farmers for centuries. Rivers provided abundant water, but it was all down at the bottom of the bank, irrigating fields that sat on the higher, flatter, and often more fertile plains above required back-breaking labor to lift the water. The Noria solved this by automating the process, using the river's own current as its engine. The basic design is a work of mechanical poetry. A large vertical wheel, often over 20 meters in diameter, is placed in a fast-flowing section of the river. Its lower paddles are submerged in the current, and the force of the water pushing against them causes the entire wheel to rotate. Fixed to the rim are containers originally ceramic pots, but later wooden boxes which fill with water as they dip into the river. As the wheel turns, these containers are carried upwards. At the very apex of the rotation, they reach a point where they tip over, pouring their water into a collection channel that is strategically placed to lead directly to a network of irrigation canals feeding the elevated farmland. It's a perfectly closed loop, a perpetual motion machine powered by nature, requiring no fuel, no animals, and minimal human intervention once constructed. The impact of this invention on agriculture, particularly in arid regions with seasonally flowing rivers, cannot be overstated. In places like the Orontes River Valley in Syria, the Noria became the backbone of local farming. It allowed for the continuous irrigation of large tracts of land that were previously considered too high and too dry to be viable for anything but the hardiest crops. This led to a dramatic increase in agricultural output, supporting larger populations and enabling the cultivation of more water-intensive and valuable crops like vegetables, fruits, and nuts. The sound of the creaking Noria wheels became the sound of prosperity, a constant, rhythmic reminder that the landscape itself was being transformed. The most spectacular testament to this technology is the city of Hama on the Orontes River, where a series of colossal Norias, some dating back to Byzantine times, still stand today. These magnificent structures, with their immense wooden frames and groaning voices, are not mere relics. They were in continuous use for well over 1,000 years, right up until the modern era. They became iconic landmarks, so central to the city's identity that Hama was famously known as the City of Norias. The technology's brilliance ensured it did not remain a local secret. Through trade and cultural exchange, the concept of the water-lifting wheel spread rapidly across the ancient and medieval world. It was adopted and adapted by the Romans, who used it in mines and for urban water supply. But its most significant journey was westward into Islamic Spain, or Al-Andalus. Here, under Muslim rule, the Noria, known as the Nyora, became a cornerstone of an agricultural revolution that turned much of the Iberian Peninsula into a verdant garden. Spanish engineers combined the Noria with their own intricate network of irrigation channels, the acequias, creating a comprehensive system that supported the famed orchards and gardens of Andalusia. The knowledge then spread further, influencing water-lifting technology across Europe. This diffusion highlights a key aspect of the Noria's success, its adaptability. It could be scaled up to monumental sizes like the wheels of Hama, or built smaller for individual farms. It could be made entirely from local materials, wood, clay, and stone by skilled village carpenters and potters, making it an accessible technology that empowered communities rather than just central authorities. Beyond its practical utility, the Noria stands as a powerful symbol. In an age before fossil fuels, it represented a pinnacle of sustainable energy use. It did not consume resources, it harnessed an existing, renewable flow. Its operation was clean, silent except for its comforting creak, and created no waste. It worked in perfect harmony with the river, using its energy without damming it or altering its course fundamentally. The Noria is a testament to a time when engineering sought to work with the grain of nature, not against it. It represents a graceful fusion of intuitive understanding of physics, readily available materials, and a deep respect for the natural forces that sustain life. In its endless, gentle turning, we see not just a machine for lifting water, but a perfect circle of ingenuity, a timeless reminder that some of the most powerful solutions are those that listen to the world around them and find a way to let nature do the work. Now we journey to the most formidable desert of all, the vast, sun-scorched expanse of the Sahara, where survival seems like a mirage and water is more precious than gold. Here, in this ocean of sand and stone, isolated communities faced an existential challenge that demanded not just ingenuity, but absolute perseverance. Their solution was a hidden lifeline known as the Fagara, an underground water harvesting system that proves even the most extreme environments can be mastered through collaboration and a deep, intimate knowledge of the land. Much like the Persian qanats and the Chinese Karez, the Fagara is a testament to a shared human genius that emerged independently across the world's arid zones, a brilliant answer to a universal need. The principle of the Fagara is one of gentle extraction. It begins by tapping into a hidden resource, shallow groundwater tables that lie trapped deep beneath dry riverbeds or at the base of distant mountain ranges, where occasional rains or ancient aquifers hold precious moisture. Skilled surveyors, their knowledge passed down through generations, would identify these ideal locations. From this source, a gently sloping underground tunnel would be painstakingly dug, often stretching for several miles, to channel the water entirely by gravity towards the waiting oasis or village. The precision required was extraordinary. The gradient had to be perfectly calculated, too steep, and the water would flow too fast, eroding the tunnel walls. Too shallow, and the water would stagnate and the tunnel would silt up. This was mathematics and hydrology practiced not with complex instruments, but with an accumulated, experiential wisdom that read the landscape like a map. Construction was a monumental communal effort, a project that bound the entire community together for a common cause. The most visible signs of a fagara on the surface are the series of vertical access shafts, spaced roughly every 15 to 30 meters, that mark the tunnel's path like a line of craters marching across the desert. These shafts were vital for every phase of the project. They provided ventilation for the diggers toiling in the dark, narrow tunnels below. They were the means for removing the excavated sand and rock. And they served as precise surveying points, allowing the builders to maintain the correct direction and slope from the mother well all the way to the distribution point. Maintaining this fragile network was an endless task. Regular cleaning parties would descend these shafts to clear out the silt and debris that inevitably accumulated, ensuring the life-giving flow was never interrupted. This was a dangerous and demanding duty, a perpetual covenant between the people and the system that sustained them. The water that finally emerged at the outlet, known as the Kasria, was cool, clean, and protected from the relentless Saharan sun that would evaporate any exposed water in a matter of hours. This was the moment of transformation. The water was then distributed through a network of smaller surface canals according to a meticulously fair and complex system of water rights. Time was the primary measure. Each farmer or family would be allotted the right to use the entire flow for a specific period, measured by the shadow of a sundial or the emptying of a water clock. This ensured that every member of the community, from the largest landowner to the smallest plot holder, received an equitable share of this most vital resource. This wasn't just practical economics, it was a social contract that prevented conflict and fostered a powerful sense of shared responsibility and interdependence. The survival of all depended on the cooperation of each. The impact of the fagara extended far beyond the date palm groves and small vegetable gardens of a single oasis. These systems were the unsung heroes of the trans-Saharan trade routes, the greatest economic and cultural network of medieval Africa. Giant caravan trails upon which salt, gold, ivory, and slaves were transported, stretched for thousands of miles across the void. The success of these arduous journeys depended entirely on a chain of reliable oases where both the traders and their camels could rest and resupply with water. The fagara systems made these oases possible. They supported permanent settlements, thriving market towns, and fortified caravanserais that dotted the trade routes like jewels. Cities like Ouargla in Algeria and Ghadaims in Libya grew into prosperous hubs precisely because their fagara networks could support not only their own population, but also the endless stream of travelers and their animals. In this way, the hidden tunnels of the fagara didn't just water crops, they facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, helping to shape the history of an entire continent. Today, many fagara systems have fallen into disuse, victims of modern technology like deep diesel pumps that can extract water faster but often with little regard for sustainability, leading to the rapid depletion of ancient aquifers. Yet the ecological wisdom embedded in the fagara is more relevant than ever. It represents a model of sustainable water use that is in perfect balance with its environment. It only draws as much water as the aquifer naturally replenishes, and it does so without any external energy input other than gravity. It is a system built for permanence, not short-term gain. In a world increasingly facing water scarcity, the fagara stands as a powerful lesson from the past, a reminder that true resilience is not found in overpowering nature with technology, but in patiently working with its rhythms, in valuing community over individual gain, and in safeguarding a precious resource for the generations yet to come. While the Noria harnessed the energy of rivers and the fagara tapped into hidden desert aquifers on the island of Sri Lanka, an entirely different hydrological challenge was being met with breathtaking ambition. Here, the ancient Sinhalese civilization confronted a climate of dramatic extremes: long, parching dry seasons followed by intense, drenching monsoon rains. To not just survive, but to build one of the ancient world's greatest and most enduring civilizations, they had to become masters of time, learning to capture the fleeting abundance of the monsoon and store it for the lean months ahead. Their solution was a landscape-scale network of artificial reservoirs, known locally as wiwa or tanks, that transformed the arid plains of Anuradhapura into a shimmering, fertile paradise, creating an hydraulic empire that would flourish for over 1,000 years. The scale and sophistication of this system is almost beyond comprehension. At its heart were 3 types of reservoirs, each serving a distinct purpose in a cascading, integrated hierarchy. The largest were the Maha-wiwa, or Great Reservoirs, like the legendary Basawakulama tank, constructed in the 4th century BCE. These massive structures were created by building immense, curved earthen dams, sometimes over 20 meters high and several kilometers long, across natural valleys to capture and impound entire rivers and seasonal runoff. The engineering behind these dams was remarkably advanced. Their cores were made of compacted clay for impermeability, backed by layers of earth and rock, and their surfaces were often clad in stone to prevent erosion. But the true genius lay in the ancillary structures that made the system work. At the end of each dam was a sophisticated sluice gate, known as a Baisakatuwa. This was essentially an ancient valve tower, a square, well-like masonry structure with tiered openings that could be opened or closed with timber beams to precisely control the release of water into a network of primary canals. This invention, a world first in hydraulic engineering, allowed for the managed, sediment-free release of water from the reservoir's middle layer, avoiding the muddy bottom and the debris-filled top. This released water then flowed into a second tier of smaller, village-level tanks that acted as distribution hubs, and from there into a vast, capillary-like network of canals that fed the paddies. The entire region surrounding Anuradhapura was thus converted into a complex, managed watershed. During the monsoon, the massive tanks would fill to capacity, their surfaces spreading out like inland seas. Then, throughout the dry season, this stored wealth was meticulously parceled out to the rice fields below. This guaranteed not just one, but often 2 annual rice harvests, creating an agricultural surplus of staggering proportions. The rice paddies themselves, constantly saturated by this reliable flow, became incredibly productive, forming the economic engine that powered the growth of a magnificent city. Anuradhapura became one of the largest and most densely populated cities of the ancient world, a sprawling metropolis of monasteries, palaces, and temples, all sustained by this man-made aquatic landscape. The system was so well designed and so robust that many of these ancient tanks, including the Basawakulama, are still in use today, irrigating the very same fields they served over 2,000 years ago. This hydrological mastery was deeply intertwined with the spiritual and political life of the Sinhalese civilization. The construction and maintenance of these vast public works required a highly organized, centralized state with the authority to mobilize enormous labor forces and the technical expertise to plan projects that would outlive their creators. The great kings of Anuradhapura, such as King Panjukabhaya and later King Datusena, staked their legitimacy on their ability to build and manage these tanks. A king who delivered a new reservoir or repaired a major dam was seen as a righteous ruler, a provider for his people, and a custodian of the land. This philosophy was beautifully encapsulated in the concept of Wiraj, the kingdom of the tanks. The health of the kingdom was literally synonymous with the health of its water storage infrastructure. This duty was also a religious act. Theravada Buddhism, which flourished in Anuradhapura, emphasizes compassion for all living beings. Providing water, the source of all life, was considered one of the highest forms of charity or dana. The construction of a tank was a meritorious deed that earned spiritual merit, ensuring that hydraulic engineering and religious devotion were two sides of the same coin. The legacy of Anuradhapuра's reservoirs offers a powerful, timeless lesson in long-term thinking and sustainable development. This was not a system built for quick profit or short-term gain. It was an investment in permanence, designed to benefit generations far into the future. The Sinhalese engineers possessed a profound understanding of their local ecology. They worked with the natural topography, using the lay of the land to their advantage rather than trying to dominate it. Their use of local materials, earth, rock, and clay, meant the structures could be easily maintained and repaired by local communities for centuries. This stands in stark contrast to some modern approaches that rely on energy-intensive pumps and non-degradable materials. The system fostered resilience, allowing the civilization to withstand periods of climate variability and even political instability, because the fundamental infrastructure for survival remained intact. The shimmering tanks of Anuradhapura are more than just historical relics. They are a silent, enduring testament to a culture that viewed water not as a commodity to be exploited, but as a sacred trust to be managed with wisdom, foresight, and a profound respect for the community of life it supports. Leaving behind the shimmering reservoirs of Sri Lanka, we now travel westward to the heart of the Iberian Peninsula, where one of the Roman Empire's most breathtaking and enduring statements of power still strides across the landscape. In the ancient city of Segovia, Spain, the Romans did not simply build an aqueduct. They sculpted the very skyline, creating a structure so audacious in its simplicity and so staggering in its scale that it has defined the city for nearly 2,000 years. This is not a relic partially buried or crumbled into obscurity. It is a living monument, a masterclass in engineering that functioned as a vital water source for the city well into the modern era, a silent granite testament to the timeless ambition of Roman hydraulics. What immediately sets the aqueduct of Segovia apart, even from other magnificent Roman works, is its raw, unadorned structural genius. Built around the 1st century CE, likely during the reign of Emperor Trajan or Domitian, its construction is a breathtaking act of confidence. The Romans used massive, rough-hewn blocks of local Guadarrama granite, and in a display of engineering bravado that still baffles modern architects, they assembled the entire towering structure without a single drop of mortar. The aqueduct stands through precision and balance alone. Each block is perfectly cut and meticulously placed, relying on gravity and the immense compressive force of the stone to hold the entire edifice together. This choice was not merely an aesthetic one, it was a profound understanding of material and force. Without mortar to crack and degrade over centuries of freezing winters and scorching summers, the structure could flex and settle without collapsing, its individual components working in perfect, silent harmony. The most iconic section of the aqueduct is its aerial traverse through the city center, a double-tiered arcade of 167 arches that soars to a height of 28.5 meters at its tallest point. Walking beneath it today, the sense of scale is overwhelming. You are dwarfed not just by its height, but by its relentless, rhythmic progression, a geometric pulse of perfect semicircles stretching across the plaza. This was not built for show. Every aspect of its design was dictated by the relentless, non-negotiable demand of hydraulics, the gradient. The aqueduct's total length is an astounding 16 kilometers, but its overall slope from its source in the Frio River to the distribution tank in the city is a minuscule 1%. This near-invisible decline, maintained with astonishing precision over such a long and varied distance, is the true miracle of its construction. The soaring arches we see in the city were not an architectural flourish. They were a necessary viaduct to maintain that crucial, gentle downhill flow across a deep valley that interrupted the water's otherwise subterranean path. The Romans made the difficult look beautiful, turning a complex engineering problem into an unforgettable landmark. For the people of Roman Segovia, this structure was the very definition of civilization. The water it brought was a catalyst for urban life on the Roman model. It supplied the essential trio of Roman urban amenities: public baths, which were centers of hygiene, socializing, and business; numerous public fountains, ensuring fresh water was available to all citizens, rich and poor; and of course the private homes of the elite. This reliable, clean water supply supported a larger population, improved public health, and allowed Segovia to flourish as a significant administrative and military center within the province of Hispania Tarraconensis. The aqueduct was more than plumbing. It was a tangible manifestation of Roman order, technology, and imperial beneficence, a daily reminder to the local population of the power and sophistication of the empire that now governed their lives. The aqueduct's most powerful statement, however, is its incredible longevity. While the Roman Empire fell, its granite heart in Segovia kept beating. It continued to function perfectly, delivering water through conquests, through the Middle Ages, through the Renaissance, and right into the 20th century. It was only in recent decades, due to modern pollution and vibration from traffic threatening the ancient stones, that its function was finally retired. This endurance elevates it from a historical artifact to something far more profound. It stands as an uninterrupted thread connecting the ancient world to our own, a piece of infrastructure that was in continuous use for longer than most modern nations have existed. It has survived not through gentle preservation, but through sheer, uncompromising ruggedness and a design so perfect it needed no fundamental improvement for 2 millennia. The Aqueduct of Segovia is the ultimate symbol of Roman engineering philosophy: build it once, build it right, and build it to last forever. It reminds us that the greatest public works are those that serve their purpose with silent efficiency while simultaneously lifting the human spirit, proving that utility and sublime beauty are not just compatible, but can be one and the same. Now let's transport ourselves to the very heart of the Aztec Empire, to the Valley of Mexico in the 14th and 15th centuries. Here, the Aztecs faced a geographical paradox that would have stymied a less ingenious people. Their magnificent capital, Tenochtitlan, was a city of islands and canals, built in the middle of a vast lake system. While this provided superb natural defenses, it also presented a seemingly insurmountable agricultural challenge: a severe shortage of arable land to feed a population that would swell to over 200,000 people. Their solution was not to conquer more distant territory for farms, but to create new, unbelievably fertile land right there in the water. They invented the chinampa, a system of floating gardens that turned the lake itself into the most productive farmland in the ancient world, a masterpiece of ecological engineering that blended agriculture, aquaculture, and urban planning into a single, sustainable system. The construction of a chinampa was a meticulous and brilliant process that transformed the shallow lake bed into a highly fertile plot. It began with the demarcation of a rectangular plot, typically about 30 meters by 250 meters. Workers would then stake out this area with a fence woven from reeds and willow trees, which were native to the marshy shores and would eventually take root, creating a living, strengthening barrier against the water. Within this enclosed space, they began a process of layered construction. They would dredge up the rich, nutrient-dense mud from the bottom of the lake canal and pile it layer upon layer into the fenced area, alternating this muck with layers of decaying vegetation and other organic matter. This process not only raised the plot above the water level but also created a deeply fertile, self-fertilizing soil bed. The final result was not a floating raft, as they are sometimes mistakenly called, but an artificial island anchored to the lake bed by the trees whose roots grew through it, a stable and permanent addition to the landscape. The true genius of the Chinampa system lies in its elegant, multi-purpose design. Each individual garden plot was separated from its neighbor by a narrow canal, just wide enough for a canoe to pass through. These canals were the circulatory system of the entire operation, serving three critical functions simultaneously. First, they provided constant, passive irrigation. The porous soil of the Chinampa would wick moisture directly from the canal, meaning the crops were always perfectly hydrated without any need for manual watering. Second, these waterways were vital transportation routes. Farmers could paddle their canoes directly from their Chinampas to the bustling markets of Tenochtitlan, delivering incredibly fresh produce. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the canals were a source of perpetual renewal. The mud at the bottom was a nutrient powerhouse, saturated with organic matter from the lake's ecosystem. By regularly dredging this muck and adding it to the top of their Chinampas, farmers continuously replenished the soil's fertility, eliminating any need for fallow periods. This created a closed-loop system where waste from the canal became food for the soil. This method resulted in an agricultural output that was nothing short of phenomenal. The constant moisture and nutrient supply allowed for year-round cultivation. It is believed that Aztec farmers could harvest up to 7 different crops per year from a single Chinampa by using a sophisticated system of seedbed nurseries and sequential planting. Primary staple was maize, but they also grew a vast array of squashes, beans, tomatoes, chilies, and flowers. The Chinampa system was so productive that some historians estimate it alone could have provided enough food for up to half of the entire population of Tenochtitlan. This incredible surplus was the bedrock of Aztec power. It supported not only the massive urban population, but also a class of full-time soldiers, priests, artisans, and administrators, and it provided the stores necessary to withstand sieges or supply military campaigns. The Chinampas allowed the Aztecs to maintain their dense urban center without being dependent on vulnerable overland supply routes. Beyond mere food production, the Chinampas represented a profound and sophisticated understanding of wetland ecology. The Aztecs were not fighting against their environment, they were leveraging its natural processes to their advantage. The canals themselves became thriving aquatic ecosystems. Farmers would intentionally stock them with fish, which provided an additional protein source. The fish waste, in turn, further fertilized the water that nourished the crops. Ducks and other waterfowl were attracted to the area, adding another layer to the local food web. This integration of agriculture and aquaculture created a biodiverse, resilient, and self-sustaining environment. It was a form of permaculture long before the term was invented. A holistic approach that viewed the farm not as an isolated field, but as an integrated part of a larger, functioning ecosystem. The Chinampa system stands as a powerful testament to human ingenuity, demonstrating that the greatest innovations often arise not from overcoming limitations, but from reimagining them entirely, seeing a lake not as a barrier to farming, but as its very foundation. While the Aztecs were engineering entire ecosystems to feed their cities on the other side of the world, the ancient Greeks were harnessing water for a purpose far more abstract yet equally foundational to civilization, the measurement of time itself. Their invention, the clepsydra or water clock, represents a fascinating divergence from the physical manipulation of water for survival. Here, water was not used to grow food or quench thirst. but to impose order, fairness, and structure upon the complex rhythms of human society. This was hydrology in the service of philosophy, law, and civic duty, proving that water's power extended far beyond the irrigation ditch and the reservoir into the very architecture of daily life. The principle behind the clepsydra was elegantly simple, yet its execution could be remarkably sophisticated. At its most basic, it consisted of a ceramic vessel filled with water, with a small hole drilled near its base. As water steadily dripped out into a second container, the dropping water level in the first vessel could be marked against a scale to indicate the passage of a specific period. The genius of the design lay in its constant, predictable flow. Unlike the sun's movement, which could be obscured by clouds, or a sundial, which was useless at night, the clepsydra offered a reliable measure of time that was independent of the weather or the time of day. This was a monumental breakthrough. For the first time, humans could quantify duration with a consistency that was not tied to the whims of nature, allowing for the precise scheduling of events and the fair allotment of a most precious resource, attention. This application of regulated flow found its most critical and famous use in the Athenian law courts, the heart of the world's first democracy. In a system where every citizen had the right to plead his own case, the potential for interminable, rambling speeches was a serious threat to justice and efficiency. The clepsydra became the great equalizer. The prosecutor and the defendant were each allotted a fixed amount of water, their time to speak. When the water assigned to one side had completely flowed out, their time was up. This ensured that neither wealth nor status could buy more time than the other. Both sides were bound by the same impartial, relentless drip of the water clock. This practice embedded a powerful concept into the heart of Western jurisprudence, that justice must be administered not only fairly but also efficiently. The clepsydra became a physical symbol of the rule of law, its steady flow a reminder that in the pursuit of truth, even speech must be measured. Beyond the courtroom, the water clock permeated other aspects of Athenian public life. It was used to time the speeches of orators in the agora, to regulate the watches of the night guard, and to signal the changing of shifts for various public posts. Perhaps most intriguingly, it became an indispensable tool for early scientists and philosophers. Thinkers like Aristotle used more complex versions of the clepsydra to time astronomical events and to conduct early experiments in physics, relying on its steady flow to measure rate and duration with a precision previously unimaginable. This ability to measure time accurately was a fundamental prerequisite for the development of the scientific method, allowing for repeatable experiments and verifiable data. In this way, the humble water clock did more than just schedule debates. It helped lay the groundwork for empirical inquiry and our modern understanding of the natural world. The legacy of the clepsydra is a profound reminder that civilization is built not just on physical infrastructure, but on intellectual and social structures as well. The ancient Greeks, masters of philosophy and democracy, used their understanding of water's properties to create a tool that enforced fairness, promoted efficiency, and advanced knowledge. It stands as a brilliant example of how a single technology can serve multiple masters: the law, the state, and science, all through the simple, graceful application of a fundamental natural principle. The water clock teaches us that the flow of water can measure more than just volume. It can measure human progress, one drop at a time. While the rhythmic turning of the Noria was powered by the river's own current, the farmers of Egypt developed a different kind of water-lifting workhorse, one that traded the whims of the current for the steady, reliable strength of domesticated animals. Enter the sakia, a technology that took the basic principle of the water wheel and supercharged it, enabling a dramatic expansion of agriculture along the Nile, and cementing its role as the lifeblood of an entire civilization for centuries. This was not just an irrigation tool, it was a vital piece of socioeconomic machinery that amplified human effort on an unprecedented scale. The mechanical design of the acequia is a fascinating evolution from simpler devices like the shaduf. Imagine a large, vertical wooden wheel, often several meters in diameter, mounted on a horizontal axle that is turned by a single ox or donkey walking in a continuous, patient circle. This is the power source, but the true innovation is on the other end of the axle. Attached to it is a second, smaller vertical wheel whose circumference is fitted with a continuous chain of pots or rectangular clay jars. As the animal plods forward, turning the main wheel, this second wheel rotates in sync, dipping its string of pots into the Nile or a primary canal. Each pot fills with water, is carried to the top of the rotation, and then tips its contents into a collection trough that feeds into a network of irrigation channels leading to the fields. The system operates in a perfect, endless loop, the slow, plodding steps of the animal translated directly into a continuous, elevated flow of water, a seamless fusion of animal power and hydraulic engineering. The impact of this invention on Egyptian agriculture was nothing short of transformative. Before the acequia, irrigation was largely a manual affair, limited by human muscle and the inefficient back and forth of the shaduf. A single shaduf could lift water to a height of about 2 to 3 meters, requiring immense human labor for a relatively small output. The acequia shattered these limitations. It could lift significantly larger volumes of water to much greater heights, often over 4 meters, and it could do so continuously for hours on end. This meant that farmers could now irrigate vast tracts of land that were previously considered too high and too far from the riverbank to be economically viable. The entire agricultural landscape of Egypt effectively expanded outward from the Nile's immediate edge, creating a much wider and more productive green belt. This led to a substantial increase in crop yields, particularly for water-intensive crops like wheat, barley, and flax, which were the staples of the Egyptian economy and its major exports. This boost in productivity had profound societal ramifications. A reliable and abundant food surplus is the fundamental prerequisite for population growth and societal complexity. The acequia played a key role in supporting the dense populations of cities like Cairo during the medieval Islamic period, a time when the city was one of the largest and most vibrant in the world. The technology also altered the social dynamics of farming. While a shaduf could be operated by a single family, a acequia represented a more significant investment in terms of construction materials and the need to maintain a draft animal. This often meant that its use was adopted by larger, more prosperous landholders or was managed through cooperative arrangements within villages. The sound of the acequia, the rhythmic creak of the wooden gears, the steady splash of water, and the patient footsteps of the ox became the soundtrack of rural Egyptian life, a symbol of both relentless toil and enduring abundance, a testament to a partnership between human, animal, and river that defined the region for generations. While the acequia amplified the agricultural output of the Nile Valley, a very different kind of water challenge was being met with breathtaking ambition far to the north, in a city perpetually living on the edge of crisis. Constantinople, the magnificent capital of the Byzantine Empire, was a metropolis blessed with a formidable strategic location, but cursed with a critical vulnerability. It possessed no major freshwater source within its mighty land walls. Its survival, especially during the prolonged sieges that defined its existence, depended entirely on its ability to capture, import, and most critically store absolutely monumental quantities of water. The Byzantine solution was to turn inward and downward, engineering a hidden, subterranean world of water storage that remains one of history's most astonishing feats of urban resilience, the vast underground cisterns. The most pressing need for this immense storage was military. Constantinople was a prize coveted by every aspiring conqueror, from the Persians and Arabs to the Bulgars, and eventually the Ottomans. A siege's primary objective was always to starve a city into submission, and that meant cutting off not just food but water. The city's famous aqueducts, like the Aqueduct of Valens, which brought water from springs over 100 kilometers away, were spectacular achievements, but they were also achingly vulnerable. An enemy army need only break a few critical sections of the elevated arcades to reduce the entire system to a useless stone sculpture. The Byzantines understood that true security meant having a water supply that was invulnerable to attack, hidden deep beneath the streets, enough to sustain the entire population for months, if not years. The cisterns were, in effect, the city's strategic water reserve, a buffer against the worst that its enemies could devise. The scale of this undertaking is almost impossible to overstate. The most famous of these subterranean cathedrals of water is the Basilica Cistern, built by Emperor Justinian in the 6th century after the devastating Nika riots. But its popular name is a misnomer. It was not a basilica for prayer, but a basilica for water. Located just southwest of the Great Hagia Sophia, this immense underground chamber measures approximately 140 meters by 70 meters, large enough to contain a full-sized football field. Its ceiling is supported by a forest of 336 marble columns, each 8 meters high, arranged in 12 orderly rows of 28. These columns, many scavenged from older Roman ruins and temples, are a fascinating architectural palimpsest, displaying a variety of styles from plain Doric to intricate Corinthian. The most famous are the two columns in the northwest corner, whose bases are carved into the visage of Medusa, one placed upside down and the other on its side, their origins and positioning a mystery that continues to spark the imagination of every visitor. This vast space could hold an astounding 80,000 cubic meters of water, enough to fill over 30 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The Basilica Cistern is merely the most famous example. It was just one node in a vast city-wide network. Historians estimate that over 100 such cisterns were constructed throughout Constantinople, from massive public reservoirs like the Basilica and the even larger, though now lost, cistern of Moschus, to smaller, private cisterns built beneath the palaces of the aristocracy and the forums of the city. This created a multi-tiered system of water security. The great public cisterns were supplied by the aqueducts and rainwater collection, serving the general populace, public baths and fountains. The private ones ensured that the ruling class would never be without water, even if the public stores were compromised or rationed. The entire system was made waterproof through the extensive use of a special hydraulic plaster called opus signinum, a mixture of lime and crushed pottery that dried into an incredibly hard, impermeable seal, ensuring that not a single precious drop would be lost to seepage into the earth. The impact of this hidden infrastructure on the life and destiny of Constantinople cannot be overstated. During the great Arab sieges of the 7th and 8th centuries, when the aqueducts were repeatedly cut, it was the water in the cisterns that allowed the city to hold out until the Byzantine navy could break the naval blockades. This resilience directly contributed to the survival of the Byzantine Empire for 1,000 years after the fall of Rome in the West, making it a bastion of Christianity and classical learning while much of Europe entered the Dark Ages. The cisterns provided more than just survival, they enabled prosperity. A reliable water supply supported a large population, fed the city's famous public baths, and supplied the industries that made Constantinople a commercial powerhouse. They were the ultimate symbol of Byzantine ingenuity, a civilization that mastered the art of defense not just with towering walls and Greek fire, but with the quiet, patient, and brilliant storage of the most fundamental resource of all. They teach a powerful lesson that resonates deeply today. The strength of a city is not just measured by its visible monuments, but by the depth and resilience of the hidden infrastructure that sustains it. But to truly understand the magic of the acequias, we must step into the heart of a Moorish village in the shade of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Here, the system was far more than just a ditch. It was the very pulse of the community, governed by a deeply ingrained social contract. The allocation of water was not a free-for-all, but a meticulously timed and fiercely protected right. The flow from the main canal was divided among the farmers based on a system of turns, known as doulas or tandas. Each farmer's plot was granted access to the water for a specific, limited period, a share measured not by volume but by time. This was often regulated by a simple water clock, a bowl with a small hole that would sink in a precise amount of time, or by the position of the sun. This ensured that everyone, from the largest landowner to the smallest subsistence farmer, received an equitable share of the life-giving resource. The entire process was overseen by a trusted local official, the Zanjero or Alcalde de Aguas water mayor, who was elected by the community for his wisdom and fairness. His word was law and his role was sacred, embodying the principle that water was a communal trust, not a private commodity. This need for flawless fairness inevitably led to another brilliant innovation, the water tribunal. Disputes over water rights are as old as agriculture itself, but in Al-Andalus they were resolved not with violence but with dialogue and jurisprudence. The most famous of these, the Tribunal de los Aguas de la Vega de Valencia, still meets every Thursday at noon at the door of the Apostles of the Valencia Cathedral, a living tradition that has continued for over 1,000 years. This court, composed of elected farmers from the surrounding communities, hears cases and settles disputes with a swiftness and finality that is the envy of modern legal systems. There are no lawyers, no lengthy appeals, and no written records. Verdicts are delivered orally and are immediately binding. This institution was not imposed from above by a distant caliph, but emerged organically from the communities themselves, a powerful testament to their commitment to self-governance and mutual respect. The acequia system, therefore, was a school for citizenship, teaching generations of people how to manage a shared resource, resolve conflicts peacefully, and build a society based on consent and cooperation rather than coercion. The success of this hydraulic democracy was the bedrock upon which the golden age of Al-Andalus was built. The reliable, equitable distribution of water created an agricultural miracle in southern Spain. The arid plains of Andalusia were transformed into a veritable paradise of productivity. The Moors introduced new crops like oranges, lemons, almonds, apricots, rice, cotton, and saffron, all of which required sophisticated irrigation to thrive. This agricultural revolution generated immense wealth and a huge surplus of food. This surplus, in turn, freed a significant portion of the population from the burdens of subsistence farming. These people became the artisans, poets, astronomers, mathematicians, and physicians who made cities like Cordoba, Granada, and Seville into legendary centers of learning and culture. The Great Mosque of Cordoba, the palaces of the Alhambra, the vast libraries, these monuments of human achievement, were literally watered by the acequias. The system supported a level of urban sophistication and intellectual ferment that illuminated the Dark Ages in Europe, preserving and advancing classical knowledge while fostering a remarkable era of religious and cultural coexistence among Muslims, Christians, and Jews. The legacy of the acequias is not confined to history books. It is etched into the very landscape of modern Spain. Thousands of miles of these channels are still in use today, maintained by communities that continue to honor the ancient practices of water sharing. They are a living reminder that the most enduring infrastructure is often that which is woven into the social fabric, governed by principles of equity and sustainability. In an era of growing water scarcity and conflict, the acequias of Al-Andalus offer a timeless blueprint. They prove that technical solutions alone are not enough. For a water system to truly flourish, it must be rooted in a culture of justice, managed by the community it serves, and dedicated to the idea that this most precious resource is a common heritage to be shared by all. Far to the north of the Maya world, in the highlands of central Mexico, another ancient civilization was achieving a different kind of urban miracle. The city of Teotihuacan, which reached its zenith around 450 CE, was a meticulously planned metropolis of over 100,000 people, one of the largest cities in the entire ancient world. Its inhabitants built monumental pyramids that still awe visitors today, the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, and laid out the city on a rigid grid plan along the massive Avenue of the Dead. But perhaps their most profound engineering achievement is one that is largely invisible to the modern eye, running beneath their feet. A sophisticated, city-wide water management system that reveals a civilization thinking about urban living on a scale and with a complexity that would not be seen again for over 1,000 years. The challenge in Teotihuacan was not bringing water in, as it was for the Romans, but managing the water that naturally fell from the sky. The city's location meant it experienced a seasonal climate with periods of intense, heavy rainfall. In a dense urban environment of stone buildings, plastered courtyards, and paved streets, this stormwater presented a major threat. Without a way to manage it, these rains would have turned the city's carefully laid avenues into rivers of mud, flooded homes and temples, and caused catastrophic erosion that would have undermined the very foundations of their monumental architecture. The Teotihuacanos responded not with reactive patches, but with a proactive, holistic plan that integrated water control into the initial design of their entire city, treating stormwater not as a waste product to be discarded, but as a valuable resource to be harvested and redirected. The key to their system was a network of carefully engineered drainage channels that ran beneath the city's floors and alongside its streets. These were not simple open ditches. They were often subterranean conduits built with stone slabs and covered with flat capstones, creating a hidden underworld of water flow. The entire city was built on a gentle, intentional slope, and these drains used this natural gradient to pull rainwater efficiently away from the urban core. Courtyards and plazas were designed with a slight convex curvature, ensuring that water would run off their surfaces and into catchment drains instead of pooling. This attention to detail at the micro level, in the very plaster of their floors, shows a pervasive hydrological consciousness. They understood that to protect the city, every single surface had to be part of the plan. But the water's journey did not end at the city limits. This is where the Teotihuacano system reveals its true genius and its stark difference from simply getting rid of a problem. The drainage network did not just dump the collected stormwater into a river or ravine. Instead, the channels were designed to direct this nutrient-rich runoff to the vast agricultural fields, known as chinampas, that surrounded the city in the Valley of Mexico. This was a closed-loop system of stunning sophistication. The rain would fall on the city, wash across its mineral-rich plaster and stone surfaces, collect soluble nutrients in the process, and then be channeled to the farmlands where those same nutrients would fertilize the crops that fed the urban population. The city itself became a catchment basin, and its water management system became a vital link in the agricultural food chain, turning a potential threat into a productive advantage. This seamless integration of hydrology and urban planning was the bedrock of Teotihuacan's longevity and power, which lasted for nearly 500 years. By preventing flooding and soil erosion within the city, they protected their immense public investments in architecture and infrastructure. By harnessing stormwater for agriculture, they bolstered their food security, supporting the dense population that provided the labor for their grand projects and the soldiers for their army. The system also had profound social and ritual implications: control over water, its distribution, its symbolic association with life and fertility, was likely a key source of power for the city's mysterious, unnamed rulers. The very act of coordinating such a vast public works project would have required a strong, centralized authority and a highly organized society, reinforcing the social order that built the pyramids. Teotihuacan stands as a powerful, ancient lesson in sustainable urbanism, a testament to the idea that a city's greatest strength lies not in overcoming nature, but in designing a way to live within it, where every drop of rain is given a purpose and a place. Imagine the audacity of the idea to carve a navigable waterway through the harsh desert, linking the mighty Nile River directly to the Red Sea. This was not a project of the modern era, but a dream pursued for millennia, and its earliest incarnation was the legendary waterway known as the Kanat, or the Pharaoh's Canal. Long before the massive excavators of the 19th century broke ground on the Suez Canal, ancient engineers were already mastering the monumental challenge of connecting two great bodies of water, driven by a vision that blended commerce, strategy, and sheer human ambition. The origins of this canal are shrouded in the mists of time, with its first iterations likely dating back to the Middle Kingdom of ancient Egypt, around the 19th century BCE. The primary motivation was trade. Egyptian pharaohs, particularly those with expansionist ambitions, looked eastward. They coveted the riches of the fabled land of Punt, incense, gold, ebony, and exotic animals, and sought more efficient routes to the copper and turquoise mines of the Sinai Peninsula. The existing overland routes were arduous, slow, and vulnerable to desert raiders. A direct water link would allow ships to sail from the Nile Valley, through the canal, and out into the Red Sea, opening up a maritime highway to the Arabian Peninsula and beyond. This was about more than convenience. It was a strategic move to project Egyptian power and control the flow of luxury goods that were vital to the economy and the religious rituals of the state. The initial attempts were likely more modest than the grand vision suggests. Historians believe the earliest canal may have actually been a clever combination of natural features and human engineering. It probably utilized a series of existing lakes and waterways in the Nile Delta, such as the Bitter Lakes, which lay along the proposed route. The real engineering challenge was the gap between these water bodies. Egyptian crews, using copper and stone tools, would have labored to dredge and connect these segments, creating a continuous, if narrow and seasonal, passage. The desert environment presented a constant battle against the encroaching sand, requiring perpetual maintenance to keep the channel clear. This was a project that demanded not just technical skill, but an unwavering political will and the resources of a centralized state to see it through. The story of the Kanat does not end with the Egyptians. Its strategic and economic value was so apparent that it became a project every subsequent great power in the region felt compelled to revisit and improve. The Persian Emperor Darius the Great, upon conquering Egypt in the 6th century BCE, took a personal interest in the canal. He sought to solidify his control over Egypt and facilitate faster communication and troop movement within his vast empire, which now stretched from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea. Darius's engineers are credited with a major expansion and renovation of the canal, making it wider and more reliably navigable. Inscriptions from his reign famously boast of its completion, claiming that ships could now sail from Egypt to Persia, a testament to the canal's role in binding together the far-flung corners of an empire. Centuries later, the pragmatic Romans, always focused on the efficient movement of goods and legions, also recognized its worth. During the rule of Emperor Trajan in the 2nd century CE, the canal was dredged and renovated once again, and it was even renamed the River of Trajan in his honor, highlighting its importance to the Roman supply lines that fed the grain-hungry city of Rome. The true legacy of the Kanat pharaon lies not in its continuous operation, but in the powerful idea it represented. It was a proof of concept on a grand scale, a demonstration that geography was not destiny and that human ingenuity could stitch together separate worlds. It proved that a canal could be more than just an irrigation ditch. It could be a geopolitical instrument, a lever of economic power that could shift the balance of trade and influence between entire regions. For over 2,000 years, the ghost of this ancient waterway haunted the desert, a tantalizing reminder of what was possible. When the French diplomat and engineer Ferdinand de Lesseps finally championed the construction of the modern Suez Canal in the 1800s, he was not inventing a new idea. He was resurrecting an ancient one, fulfilling a dream first dreamed by Egyptian pharaohs, a dream of bridging continents and commanding the routes upon which the world's wealth flowed. The Kanat pharaon was the primordial ancestor of every great canal that followed, a bold first stroke in humanity's long endeavor to reshape the map itself. Now let's journey to the sun-drenched plains of South India, where ancient kingdoms confronted a rhythm of life dictated by the dramatic swing of the monsoon. Here, the challenge wasn't a total lack of water, but its fierce inconsistency, long, scorching months of drought broken by intense, drenching rains that would flood the land and then vanish. The solution they developed was not to fight this cycle, but to embrace it with breathtaking elegance, creating a landscape dotted with countless man-made lakes known as eres, or irrigation tanks. These were not mere ponds. They were sophisticated, community-built reservoirs that turned the seasonal deluge into a lifeline for one of the world's most enduring agricultural traditions, fostering a culture where water stewardship was woven into the very fabric of society. The construction of an eyrie was a monumental feat of landscape engineering that transformed the entire topography. Kings and local chieftains would identify a gently sloping valley or a natural depression where water would naturally gather. Across the mouth of this basin, they would construct a massive, crescent-shaped earthen embankment, often reinforced with stone masonry on the inner face to withstand the tremendous pressure of the impounded water. The scale of some of these tanks is staggering, with embankments stretching for kilometers, creating reservoirs that could submerge thousands of acres. But the true genius lay in the ancillary structures that made the system sustainable. Each tank featured a complex arrangement of sluice gates, known as madogu or avari, built with precise stone conduits that could be opened or closed with wooden logs to control the release of water into a network of primary and secondary canals. Crucially, many tanks also included a surplus weir, a cleverly designed overflow channel that would safely divert excess water during particularly heavy rains, preventing the catastrophic failure of the main embankment and protecting the downstream villages from floods. This holistic design managed the entire water cycle: capture, storage, distribution, and safety. With remarkable foresight, this hydrological mastery reached its zenith under the Great Chola dynasty, whose engineers conceived and built one of the ancient world's most audacious water regulation structures, the Grand Anicut or Kalanai. Built across the mighty Kaveri River in the 2nd century CE by the legendary King Caracalon, this massive stone dam is a testament to ambition on an imperial scale. It is not a dam in the modern sense of creating a deep reservoir. Instead, it is a diversion weir. Its purpose was to gently raise the level of the river and, with breathtaking precision, split its flow. A significant portion of the water was diverted into a massive canal that fed the Grand Anicut Channel, which itself became the artery for a vast network of smaller channels and tanks, bringing life-giving water to arid lands to the north. The remaining flow continued down the original river course, sustaining the delta to the south. This equitable partitioning of a major river's flow, ensuring that communities across a wide region could share its bounty, represents a staggering leap in hydraulic understanding and political organization. Astonishingly, after nearly 2,000 years of continuous use, the Grand Anicut still stands and functions today, a silent, enduring monument to Chola engineering. The impact of this tank-based system extended far beyond the fields. It became the cornerstone of South Indian social and cultural life. These tanks were rarely just utilitarian projects. They were often associated with magnificent temples whose towering gateways or gopurams would reflect in the placid waters of the tank. The temple and the tank were a single, integrated unit, the spiritual heart and the life-giving heart of the community. The water was used for ritual ablutions, for temple ceremonies, and to sustain the lush gardens that surrounded these sacred complexes. This connection elevated water management from a mere technical task to a moral and religious duty. The maintenance of the tanks and the fair distribution of their water were governed by elaborate and sophisticated local agreements. Village assemblies, known as sabars, would appoint water masters who were responsible for overseeing the opening of sluice gates and ensuring that every farmer received their allotted share based on the size of their land and its location in the irrigation hierarchy. This fostered a powerful sense of communal responsibility and interdependence, where the well-being of the entire village depended on the cooperation of every individual. The legacy of South India's tank irrigation system is a profound lesson in long-term, sustainable water management that is desperately relevant today. This was a system built for permanence, designed to work in harmony with the local ecology. The tanks recharged groundwater, supported local biodiversity, and created microclimates that moderated temperatures. Most importantly, it was a system managed by the community for the community. It was not imposed from a distant capital but maintained by those who depended on it most directly, creating a built-in incentive for sustainability. In an era where massive, centralized water projects often displace communities and disrupt ecosystems, the humble IRRI stands as a powerful alternative model. It demonstrates that the most resilient systems are often those that are locally managed, ecologically integrated, and culturally cherished, a timeless blueprint for how to live in balance with the precious and unpredictable gift of rain. While the great empires of the Old World were building with stone and mortar, a remarkable culture in what is now the Sonoran Desert of Arizona was undertaking a hydraulic project of staggering ambition, using little more than woven baskets and stone tools. The Hohokam, a name given to them by their modern Owadam descendants meaning those who have gone, faced an environment of brutal extremes. In this sun-scorched landscape, where temperatures could soar and rain was a fleeting, unreliable gift, they chose not to merely survive, but to flourish by mastering the art of channeling distant rivers directly to their fields. Their achievement stands as one of the most extensive and sophisticated irrigation systems ever created in prehistoric North America, a vast man-made watershed etched into the desert floor. The scale of their canal network is almost incomprehensible. Over centuries, the Hohokam dug hundreds of miles of channels, with the main trunk lines stretching over 10 miles from their intake points on the Salt and Gila rivers. The entire system around present-day Phoenix was a complex, branching web that transformed the valley into a fertile green oasis. Building these canals required an incredible depth of geographical and hydrological understanding. Surveyors had to plot the course for miles, maintaining a precise, gentle gradient that was just steep enough to keep the water moving, but not so steep that it would erode the channels or flow too violently for the fields. They accomplished this with simple tools and an intimate knowledge of the land's subtle contours, a feat of engineering intuition that still commands respect. The construction itself was a massive communal effort, using handheld stone hoes and baskets to carry the dirt. Generations of workers excavated these arteries through the hard desert soil, creating canals that were wide and deep enough to carry a substantial volume of life-giving water. This engineered landscape supported large, permanent villages that thrived for generations. The site of Snaketown, one of their major cultural and population centers, was home to a complex society with ball courts, platform mounds, and skilled artisans producing exquisite shell jewelry and intricately decorated pottery. The reliable agricultural surplus generated by the canals meant that not everyone had to farm. This allowed for the development of specialized crafts, religious leadership, and social complexity. They traded with distant cultures, from the ancestral Pueblones to the west to the Mesoamerican civilizations far to the south, exchanging their surplus cotton and other goods for exotic items like copper bells and macaw feathers. The canals were the economic engine that powered this entire society, enabling a level of cultural sophistication in the heart of the desert that rivaled many contemporary cultures across the continent. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the Hohokam system was its dynamic nature. This was not a static infrastructure built once and forgotten. The desert rivers they relied upon were not tame and predictable. They were volatile, prone to flash floods that could fill a canal with silt or destroy its banks in a single violent event. The Hohokam response reveals a culture of profound resilience and adaptability. They were in a constant dialogue with their environment, continuously maintaining, repairing, and even redesigning their canals. Archaeological evidence shows channels being abandoned, redug, and realigned over time. This was a society that learned to expect change and built a flexibility into their very way of life, understanding that sustainability meant not building a perfect, permanent system, but rather maintaining the knowledge and social organization to constantly manage and adjust it. Then, around the 1400s, the Hohokam world, which had persisted for over 1,000 years, underwent a dramatic transformation. Their large villages were gradually abandoned, and the great canal network fell into disuse. The reasons are still debated by archaeologists: a prolonged period of drought that overwhelmed the system's capacity, catastrophic floods that caused irreparable damage, or perhaps internal social tensions exacerbated by these environmental pressures. Their disappearance is not a story of failure, but rather a poignant reminder of the delicate balance between human ingenuity and environmental limits. The Hohokam legacy is a powerful testament to the potential for innovation in the most unexpected places, proving that a desert, when met with determination and collective effort, can indeed be made to bloom. Their story echoes down the centuries, a silent lesson written in the faint traces of canals that still crisscross the Arizona desert, waiting to be seen by those who know where to look. While the Hohokam were etching their canals into the Arizona desert, across the globe in the birthplace of democracy, another kind of water revolution was taking shape, one that would fuel not just agriculture, but philosophy, art, and civic life itself. Ancient Athens, celebrated for its intellectual and political triumphs, faced a very practical problem that threatened its very existence: how to provide a reliable water supply for a rapidly growing city perched on a dry peninsula. Their solution was a masterful blend of engineering and foresight that wove water security directly into the fabric of their legendary Golden Age, proving that the flow of ideas could not flourish without the fundamental flow of clean, accessible water. The Athenian approach was a sophisticated multi-source strategy, a testament to their pragmatic understanding that resilience came from diversification. They did not rely on a single river or spring. Instead, they tapped into a network of local sources, including the iconic Ilissos and Eridanos rivers, and most importantly, a series of deep wells that accessed the Athenian aquifer. But their most ambitious project was the aqueduct commissioned by the tyrant Pisistratos in the 6th century BCE. This was no soaring Roman arcade of stone, but a masterpiece of subtle, underground engineering. It channeled water from the abundant springs on the slopes of Mount Hymettus and Mount Pentelicus, the very mountains that provided the marble for the Parthenon, and carried it over 16 kilometers to the heart of the city. For most of its journey, this vital artery was a hidden, protected tunnel, a covered pipeline known as a hypogeosphoras, dug deep beneath the earth. This subterranean design was brilliantly pragmatic. It shielded the water from the evaporating heat of the Attic sun, and most crucially, protected it from contamination and from being easily cut by an attacking army during the frequent sieges that defined ancient warfare. This imported water was then distributed through a carefully managed public system that reflected the emerging democratic values of the city. It fed a network of handsome public fountains known as krenai, which were far more than just utilitarian water points. Structures like the famous Enikraunos fountain, mentioned by the historian Thucydides, were architectural landmarks, often featuring beautiful colonnades and carved reliefs. These were the social hubs of daily Athenian life, especially for women, who were primarily responsible for water collection. Here, at the fountain house, citizens would gather, exchange news, and engage in the casual discourse that is the lifeblood of any community. The water itself was often piped through ornate spouts in the form of a lion's head or a bronze mask, transforming a simple chore into a small moment of civic beauty and dignified public interaction. This ensured that every citizen, regardless of wealth or status, had access to clean drinking water, a fundamental equalizer that supported public health and fostered a shared sense of civic belonging. The strategic importance of this system cannot be overstated, forming a critical layer in the city's legendary resilience. The Pisistrated aqueduct and later additions were not merely conveniences, they were instruments of national security. When the Spartan king Archidamos II invaded Attica at the start of the Peloponnesian War, his strategy was to lay waste to the countryside and force the Athenians to fight outside their walls. But the Athenian leader Pericles, in a moment of supreme strategic insight, refused. He ordered the entire rural population to retreat behind the massive long walls that connected Athens to its port at Piraeus. This meant that for years on end, the city's population was swelled far beyond its normal capacity, all while under constant threat of siege. It was the secure water supply from the aqueducts and the fortified wells within the walls that made this defiant strategy possible. Without it, the city would have succumbed to thirst long before the plague ever struck. Water, therefore, was the unsung hero that allowed Athenian democracy and culture to endure through its darkest hours. Ultimately, the story of Athens's water system is the story of how infrastructure enables intellectual and cultural flourishing. The reliable supply did more than just prevent thirst. It supported the famous Athenian baths, which promoted hygiene and provided spaces for relaxation and conversation. It fed the gymnasiums like the Academy and the Lyceum, where young men engaged in athletic training and where philosophers like Plato and Aristotle would later walk and teach their students. The public health benefits of a clean water source, though not understood in modern germ theory terms, undoubtedly contributed to a population that was generally healthier and more capable of pursuing activities beyond mere survival. The practical democracy of the fountain, where all citizens had equal access, mirrored the political democracy of the assembly. The water that flowed from Mount Pentelicus did not just quench thirst, it watered the very roots of Western civilization, enabling the concentration of people, time, and energy required to ask profound questions about the world and to create art, architecture, and philosophy that would echo for millennia. In Athens, water was not separate from civic vitality. It was its most essential prerequisite. Now we travel to the rugged and arid landscapes of Afghanistan, where a hidden network of life-sustaining tunnels known as the Karez represents a profound testament to human perseverance. Much like the Persian qanats they closely resemble, these subterranean channels are the product of generations of specialized knowledge, a brilliant adaptation to an environment where surface water is a fleeting luxury. For centuries, the Karez has been the silent, beating heart of oasis communities across the country, allowing agriculture and culture to flourish in places where nature seems to have intended otherwise. This is not a system imposed by a distant state, but one born from the ground up, maintained by the very communities whose survival depends on its gentle, gravity-fed flow. The construction of a Karez is a feat of intuitive engineering that demands an almost supernatural understanding of the hidden landscape. It begins with the meticulous search for an aquifer, often at the base of mountain ranges where snowmelt and scarce rainfall percolate deep into the alluvial soil. From this mother well, skilled crews known as mucanis begin the arduous task of digging a gently sloping underground tunnel back towards the village or fields that await the water. The precision required is staggering. The gradient must be perfect, just steep enough to keep the water moving to prevent stagnation and siltation, but never so steep that it causes erosion that could collapse the tunnel. This is calculated not with laser levels, but with generations of accumulated wisdom, using simple plumb bobs and an intimate feel for the land. The only visible signs of this hidden river on the surface are the periodic vertical shafts used for ventilation during construction and for the endless maintenance required to keep the life-giving flow clear of debris. What truly sets the Karez apart is its deeply embedded social structure. This technology is more than just hydrology. It is a framework for community cooperation and equitable resource sharing. The knowledge of how to locate the water, dig the tunnels, and most critically, how to maintain them is not written in manuals but passed down orally from master to apprentice, a sacred trust within families and clans. The entire community has a vested interest in the system's upkeep, often organizing collective work parties to descend the shafts and clear out silt. The distribution of the water itself is governed by a complex and ancient set of customary laws, ensuring that every family receives a fair share based on the size of their land or a time-based allotment. This communal management prevents conflict and fosters a powerful sense of mutual interdependence, where the survival of all is literally tied to the cooperation of each member. In a nation that has faced immense political upheaval and conflict, the enduring functionality of the Karez systems speaks volumes about their resilience and sustainable design. While modern infrastructure projects have often faltered, these ancient tunnels have continued to provide a reliable water source, independent of external fuel or technology. They operate entirely on gravity, require no electricity, and because the water travels underground, it is protected from the contaminating dust of conflict and the devastating evaporation of the harsh sun. This makes the Karez not just a historical artifact, but a vital piece of contemporary infrastructure that continues to support rural livelihoods and food security in a challenging environment. The Karez stands as a powerful counterpoint to the often disruptive nature of modern extraction technologies like deep well diesel pumps. Those pumps can pull water faster, but they do so at a great cost, rapidly depleting ancient aquifers and lowering the water table to a point where the traditional Karez systems can run dry. The Karez, by contrast, represents a model of sustainable water use that is in balance with the local ecology. It draws only what the aquifer can naturally recharge, ensuring its own longevity and that of the community it supports. It is a poignant reminder that the most advanced solution is not always the most technologically complex, but rather the one that is most attuned to its environment and most integrated into the social fabric. The Karez is a legacy of indigenous ingenuity, a timeless blueprint for how to live in harmony with a scarce resource, proving that true sustainability is often found in the wisdom of the past. While the Athenians channeled water for democratic fountains and the Afghans for desert survival, the Romans turned this essential resource into the very centerpiece of social life and imperial luxury. Their magnificent public baths, known as thermae, were far more than just places to get clean. They were sprawling, multi-functional complexes that stood as monuments to Roman engineering and a very specific vision of civilized living. At places like the iconic site in Bath, England, they didn't just use water, they mastered it, orchestrating its temperature, flow, and disposal with a hydraulic sophistication that supported vast, bustling centers of leisure, business, and culture. The foundation of this marvel was often a gift from the gods themselves, natural hot springs. At Aqueducts, the Roman name for bath, water heated deep within the Earth's crust and enriched with minerals like calcium and sulfate surged to the surface at a constant, scalding 46 degrees Celsius. The Romans saw this not as a geological curiosity, but as a divine endowment from the goddess Sulis Minerva, and they built their entire complex around this sacred source. But harnessing this boiling water required incredible ingenuity. They constructed a reservoir to contain the spring's flow, lining it with lead to make it watertight. From there, they engineered a system of lead pipes to distribute the heated water throughout the facility. The use of lead pipes, or fistulae, was a standard Roman practice, achieved by wrapping sheets of the metal around a core and soldering the seam. This network delivered the hot spring water directly to the central plunge pool, the caldarium, maintaining its therapeutic heat without any need for artificial heating, a permanent natural luxury. For baths not blessed with a hot spring, Roman engineers devised an even more spectacular system to heat both the water and the very air of the buildings, the hypocaust. This was essentially an ancient form of central heating, a technology of stunning simplicity and effectiveness. The entire bathhouse floor was raised on hundreds of short brick pillars called pili, creating a hollow space beneath the rooms. In an adjacent furnace room, slaves, known as fornicators, would maintain a constant fire, feeding it with wood or charcoal. The hot gases and smoke from this fire were then channeled through this subterranean maze, heating the floor tiles above to a comfortable warmth. But the genius didn't stop at the floor. The heat continued its journey through box tiles embedded within the walls, creating a radiant heat that warmed the entire room before finally escaping through chimneys in the roof. This system allowed for precise temperature control in different rooms: the intense, dry heat of the laconicum, a sauna-like room, the steamy warmth of the caldarium hot bath, the mild heat of the tepidarium warm room, and the cool relief of the frigidarium cold plunge pool. Managing the vast quantities of water required for these enormous complexes was a plumbing masterpiece. Beyond the lead pipes for hot water, the Romans built extensive networks for cold freshwater, often fed by aqueducts and equally sophisticated drains for wastewater. They used bronze valves to control flow and mix water to the desired temperature. The entire complex was designed with a gentle slope towards strategically placed drains, ensuring that used water was efficiently carried away from the bathing areas and into the city's main sewer system. This attention to sanitation was crucial for public health in a crowded city. The Great Bath at Bath is a perfect example of this holistic design, featuring a sophisticated overflow channel to manage the constant surge from the spring and a massive drain large enough for a person to walk through, ensuring the sacred waters never flooded the complex. The ultimate impact of these hydraulic wonders was social and cultural. A trip to the baths was a daily ritual for Romans of all classes, a right of citizenship subsidized by the state or wealthy benefactors. Here, the rigid hierarchies of Roman society were temporarily softened. Senators, soldiers, merchants, and freedmen would mingle in the steamy halls, discussing politics, striking business deals, listening to poets, or simply exercising in the palaestra, the open-air courtyard. The baths were the internet, the gym, the community center, and the spa of the ancient world, all rolled into one. They promoted a standard of public hygiene that was unprecedented, likely reducing the spread of disease and fostering a shared Roman identity. The sophisticated hydraulics that made it all possible were a powerful symbol of Roman order and technological prowess, demonstrating that their engineering brilliance was applied not just to conquest and aqueducts, but to enhancing the everyday quality of life, turning the simple act of bathing into a cornerstone of their civilization. While the Romans were perfecting the art of heating and moving water for their luxurious baths on the other side of the world, Chinese engineers were tackling a much more fundamental challenge: how to feed a vast and growing empire. During the prosperous Han Dynasty around the 1st and 2nd centuries CE, agricultural innovation was not just a matter of convenience, it was a matter of state security. The solution they developed was a machine of elegant practicality, a device that would become one of history's most impactful exports: the square pallet chain pump, a clever system of linked buckets that could lift water from low-lying rivers and pour it tirelessly into the irrigation canals that fed the fields above. The design of the chain pump was a masterpiece of translational mechanics, turning simple rotational energy into a continuous flow of water. Imagine a long, looped chain made of wooden plates or pallets, connected by links so that each plate sits at a right angle to the next. This chain is then threaded over a large, rotating wooden wheel at the top and a smaller one at the bottom, which is partially submerged in the water source. The real magic happens when that top wheel is turned, either by a human treading on it like a giant hamster wheel, or by an ox or donkey walking in a circle to drive a rotating beam. As the wheel turns, it pulls the entire chain in a continuous loop. The pallets on the downward side move freely, but as they enter the water at the bottom and begin their upward journey, they scoop up a load of water. The wooden housing surrounding the ascending side of the chain forms a tight, sealed tube, preventing the water from spilling back out. Each pallet acts like a tiny elevator car, carrying its payload to the very top, where it tips over the wheel and deposits the water into a waiting collection trough that leads directly to the irrigation network. It was a perpetual mechanical bucket brigade. The impact of this invention on Chinese agriculture was transformative. Before the chain pump, farmers relied on simpler but far less efficient methods like the well sweep, which could only lift a single bucket at a time with significant effort. The chain pump, by contrast, provided a non-stop, high-volume flow. It could lift water to significantly greater heights, often 4 or 5 meters, allowing farmers to irrigate vast tracts of land that were previously too high and dry to be productive. This was a quantum leap in efficiency. A single machine, operated by one person or a single animal, could now do the work of dozens of laborers with buckets, freeing up immense human capital for other tasks and dramatically boosting crop yields. In the fertile river valleys of China, this meant that rice paddies could be expanded, more reliable harvests could be guaranteed, and the immense population of the Han Empire could be fed more reliably, cementing the dynasty's power and stability. But the true testament to its brilliance is how widely and rapidly the technology spread, becoming one of ancient Asia's most successful pieces of intellectual property. The basic design was so effective and adaptable that it was quickly adopted throughout China and then began its journey along trade routes. It spread south into Vietnam and across the sea to Korea. Most significantly, it moved west, likely introduced to the Islamic world through Central Asian contacts, where it was adapted and improved upon. From there, it entered Europe, with written descriptions appearing in Renaissance engineering texts. In each new culture, the core principle remained the same, but the execution was tweaked to suit local materials and needs. This widespread adoption wasn't just about the machine itself. It was about the transfer of an idea, the concept of using mechanized, continuous motion to overcome the relentless, back-breaking labor of irrigation. The chain pump became a universal symbol of agricultural progress. What makes the chain pump so enduringly significant is that it represents a pivotal moment in the history of technology, the shift from simple tools to true machines in the service of agriculture. It wasn't just an extension of human muscle, it was a force multiplier that amplified effort through clever gearing and mechanics. This allowed societies to scale up their food production in a way that was previously impossible, supporting higher population densities and more complex urban centers. It demonstrates a fundamental truth that civilizations are not just built on water, but on the technologies that move it. The humble chain pump, with its creaking wooden pallets and patient, plodding oxen, was no less important to human history than the monumental aqueduct. It was a democratization of hydraulic power, putting the ability to reshape the landscape and secure a harvest into the hands of individual communities, one rotating pallet at a time. High in the mountains of Bali, where volcanic peaks pierce the clouds and the air is thick with moisture, the island's lifeblood begins its journey. Rainwater and natural springs filter through rich, dark soil, gathering into streams that will eventually feed every field, every village, and every family below. For over 1,000 years, the farmers of Bali have faced a critical question. How do you fairly share this single, cascading source of water among thousands of individual rice terraces carved into the sides of mountains? Their answer was not a complex network of valves and meters administered by a central authority, but something far more profound and enduring. They created the Subak system, a democratic water management cooperative so deeply woven into the fabric of life that its headquarters are not in an office but in a temple. At the heart of every Subak is its water temple, a spiritual and administrative center where the members, the farmers who own the land, gather to make decisions. These are not top-down directives from a distant government. This is a pure local democracy. The farmers themselves elect their leaders, debate water allocation, set planting schedules, and collectively agree on the maintenance of the canals and weirs that crisscross their landscape. The meetings are governed by two fundamental principles that are considered inseparable. Trihita Karana, a Hindu philosophy meaning three causes of well-being, which emphasizes harmony between humans and gods, humans and humans, and humans and nature. This isn't just lofty idealism, it is the practical, enforceable law of the land. A farmer who steals water or refuses to participate in the communal cleaning of canals isn't just breaking a rule, he is disrupting the spiritual and social harmony of the entire community, an offense with both social and divine consequences. This spiritual framework gives the system its remarkable resilience. The entire agricultural calendar is synchronized with a series of elaborate temple ceremonies. The most important decisions, such as when to begin planting across a whole watershed, are made by high priests in major water temples like the Pura Ulan Danu Bata, the temple that oversees the lake believed to be the ultimate source of all water on Bali. This spiritual coordination creates a staggered harvest schedule across the island. Rather than every farmer planting and demanding water at the exact same time, which would lead to chaos and shortage, the temple schedule ensures that pests are naturally controlled. If a pest outbreak occurs in one area, the pests will have no green, young rice plants to move to in the next area, as those fields will be at a different stage of growth. This is a form of integrated pest management that modern science is only now fully appreciating, and it was encoded into ritual centuries ago. The result of this beautiful synthesis of faith, community, and ecology is the iconic landscape Bali is famous for. The breathtaking emerald green terraces that cascade down mountainsides like steps for giants are not a happy accident of nature. They are the direct physical manifestation of the Subak system. The water flows from the highest terraces down to the lowest in a carefully managed sequence, with each farmer receiving their allotted time to irrigate. The system is designed for maximum percolation and minimum runoff, ensuring the soil remains saturated and nutrients are recycled. This isn't just farming. It is a form of landscape-scale engineering that creates a stable, self-sustaining ecosystem. The terraces themselves act as a massive sponge, absorbing rainfall and recharging the aquifers that feed the springs, effectively creating a perpetual water cycle that the Subak manages with reverent care. In 2012, UNESCO recognized the Subak system as a World Heritage Site, not just for its visual beauty, but for its outstanding value as a cultural landscape. It stands as a powerful counterpoint to purely technological or bureaucratic approaches to resource management. The Balinese system demonstrates that sustainability is not just an engineering problem, but a social and spiritual one. It proves that when a community shares a deep, sacred respect for a resource and has a fair, transparent process for managing it together, they can create something that is not only productive but also breathtakingly beautiful and resilient enough to last for a millennium. In a world grappling with water scarcity and conflict, the water temples of Bali offer a silent, profound lesson that the most advanced system might be one that nourishes the soul as surely as it waters the crop. Far to the south of the Inca Empire, in one of the most arid landscapes on the entire planet, a mysterious and brilliant culture faced a water challenge so extreme it seems almost impossible to overcome. The Nazca people flourished in the bone-dry valleys of coastal Peru between 200 BCE and 600 CE, a region where some years pass with no measurable rainfall at all. This is a land where the sun is relentless and the rivers are little more than empty, gravel-strewn channels for most of the year, flowing only for brief, violent periods when rare rains fall in the distant Andes. Yet it was here that the Nazca created their vast and enigmatic geoglyphs, the famous Nazca lines, and sustained a sophisticated society for centuries. Their secret to survival lies not on the surface, but beneath it in a network of miraculous spiral springs known as the Puquios, an engineering marvel that turned the desert itself into a source of life. The design of the Puquios is as elegant as it is effective, a testament to a profound understanding of hidden hydrology. Unlike the long-distance aqueducts of the Romans, the Puquios were not built to transport surface water from a distant source. Instead, they were designed to tap directly into the subterranean groundwater that flows deep beneath the desert valleys. The system begins with a horizontal trench or filtration gallery, dug deep into the earth to intersect with the water table. This tunnel acts like a subterranean straw, allowing water to seep in from the saturated soil and gravel of the aquifer. But the most iconic and visually striking feature is the entrance to this tunnel, a massive corkscrew-shaped borehole that spirals down from the desert surface to meet the horizontal gallery far below. These spirals, often lined with river stones to prevent collapse, are not just for access. Their unique shape is thought to serve a crucial aerodynamic purpose. As wind blows across the desert floor, it is funneled down these spiral openings, creating a pressure differential that actually helps to pull the water through the underground tunnel and up to the surface, effectively using the desert's own harsh winds to power a gentle, natural pumping system. This ingenious method of water capture provided a solution to the Nazca's most pressing problem, a reliable, year-round water supply that was immune to evaporation. Because the water traveled and was accessed underground, it was protected from the scorching sun that would have instantly claimed any water stored in an open reservoir. The water that emerged from the Puquios was cool, clean, and constant, unaffected by the years-long droughts on the surface. This allowed the Nazca to create verdant oases in the midst of absolute barrenness. They constructed complex networks of surface canals that branched out from the Puquio outlets, distributing this precious water to fields where they grew cotton, maize, beans, and squash. This agricultural surplus was the absolute foundation of their society, supporting the population centers that could then dedicate time and resources to the immense cultural projects for which they are best known. The connection between the Puquios and the world-famous Nazca lines is profound and direct. The construction and maintenance of these vast geoglyphs, enormous figures of monkeys, spiders, and birds etched into the desert pavement, would have required a large, stable, and well-organized population. Those workers needed to be fed and hydrated. The agricultural abundance made possible by the Puquio system provided the food surplus that freed a segment of the population from farming, allowing them to become the artists, engineers, and laborers who could devote themselves to what we would consider non-essential, spiritual, or artistic endeavors. Furthermore, many researchers now believe the lines themselves are deeply connected to this vital resource. Some of the long, straight geoglyphs seem to point directly toward the locations of Puquios, suggesting they may have been part of a vast ceremonial map, a way to pay homage to the life-giving water sources or to petition the gods for their continued flow. The Puquios were not just practical infrastructure, they were likely sacred landmarks, the beating heart of both the physical and spiritual life of the Nazca people. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of the Puquios is that they are not merely ancient relics to be studied by archaeologists. Many of them are still in use today, over 1,000 years after they were first built, maintained and relied upon by the modern communities of the Nazca region. This enduring functionality is the highest possible compliment to their design. It speaks to a system built not for short-term gain, but for permanence, constructed in perfect harmony with the natural hydraulic cycle of the desert. The continued use of the Puquios also represents a living cultural tradition, where knowledge of their maintenance and the social structures for managing their water have been passed down through countless generations. They stand as a powerful, silent rebuke to the notion that advanced technology must be complex or energy-intensive. The Nazca achieved a miracle of sustainable engineering using little more than an intimate knowledge of their environment, simple tools, and the ingenious application of basic physics, proving that true innovation is not about overpowering nature, but about learning to listen to it and work with its deepest rhythms. Looking back across this incredible tapestry of human ingenuity, from the qanats of Persia to the Puquios of the Nazca, a powerful and unifying truth emerges. These were not isolated acts of desperation, but profound transformations of a fundamental human relationship with nature. Each system, in its own unique way, represents a moment when a society stopped seeing water as an unpredictable force to be feared or a limited resource to be hoarded, and began to see it as a partner, a dynamic element that could be understood, guided, and collaborated with to build a better world. They transformed a universal challenge into their greatest opportunity, and in doing so, they laid the hydraulic foundations upon which temples, empires, and entire cultures were built. The lessons they offer are not locked in the past, they are urgently relevant blueprints for our own future. In an era of deepening climate uncertainty, where mega droughts and catastrophic floods are becoming frighteningly common, the wisdom of these ancient engineers speaks to us with a new clarity. Consider the principle of working with gravity, not against it. The Romans, the Persians, and the Incas all mastered this simple, energy-free technology, creating systems that moved water for centuries without a single watt of electricity. In a world now grappling with the immense carbon cost of powering massive desalination plants and pumping water over mountain ranges, this ancient elegance is a powerful rebuke to our energy-intensive solutions. It reminds us that sometimes the most advanced technology is the one that demands the least from our planet. Perhaps the most vital lesson is one of community and equitable governance. The Subak system of Bali, the water tribunals of Spain, and the shared maintenance of the Afghan Karez all point to a single, inescapable conclusion. Sustainable water management is ultimately a social challenge, not just a technical one. These systems thrived because they were built on a foundation of transparency, mutual responsibility, and fair distribution. They were managed by the people who depended on them most directly, creating a built-in incentive for long-term care and preventing the tragic overuse that occurs when a resource is treated as a free-for-all. In our modern world, where water scarcity often leads to conflict and where corporate interests can override local needs, these ancient models of community-based cooperation offer a compelling alternative path forward. Ultimately, these 29 marvels are more than just historical curiosities or feats of engineering. They are a testament to human resilience and adaptability. They prove that we are at our most innovative not when we try to dominate nature with overwhelming force, but when we observe its rhythms deeply, learn from its logic, and design solutions that are in harmony with it. The Nazca didn't conquer their desert, they listened to it, uncovering its hidden water with spiral springs. The Hohokam didn't defeat their arid environment, they engaged in a constant, dynamic dance with the volatile rivers, adapting their canals again and again. This flexible, responsive mindset is perhaps the greatest legacy they leave us. As we face our own uncertain hydrological future, we would do well to remember that the goal is not to build the biggest dam or the most powerful pump, but to create systems that are as resilient, adaptable, and deeply connected to their place as the ones that allowed these ancient civilizations to not just survive, but to truly flourish for centuries on end. From the hidden qanats of Persia to the soaring aqueducts of Rome, these 29 ancient water systems represent far more than just historical engineering. They are a profound testament to the human spirit's ability to innovate and adapt. Each one of these marvels, from the Stepwells of India to the chinampas of the Aztecs, showcases a unique dialogue between a culture and its environment, a brilliant response to the universal challenge of securing life's most essential resource. They allowed societies to not just survive, but to truly flourish, transforming barren deserts into lush gardens and founding mighty cities in the most improbable of places. The agricultural surplus they enabled fed the artisans, soldiers, priests, and thinkers who built the foundations of our modern world, proving that the flow of water is inextricably linked to the flow of ideas, culture, and progress itself. As we stand today facing our own global water crises, from deepening droughts to polluted waterways, the lessons embedded in these ancient systems have never been more vital. They teach us about sustainability, showing us how to work with gravity and natural topography rather than against it. They teach us about community, demonstrating that equitable sharing and cooperative management are the cornerstones of any lasting solution. And perhaps most importantly, they teach us about resilience, reminding us that long-term thinking and a deep respect for natural cycles are the keys to survival. These are not outdated concepts. They are urgently relevant blueprints for a future where water scarcity will increasingly define geopolitical and social stability. This journey through hydraulic history is a powerful reminder of our shared ingenuity and our capacity to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. If you've enjoyed exploring these ancient mysteries with us, we'd be incredibly grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the fascinating enigmas of our past. Now, we'd love to hear from you. Which of these 29 water systems amazed you the most? Was it the mathematical precision of the Roman aqueducts, the communal spirit of the Balinese Subak, or the hidden genius of the Nazca Puquios? Share your thoughts and your own local water stories in the comments below, and let's keep this conversation flowing.